Good morning. Welcome, everyone. Welcome to the Future of CX, AI and Automation. I'm Alex, and I'll be your host today from IQPC. We've got 6 fantastic sessions today for you. Before we get started, I might just run you through a bit of housekeeping so you feel really comfortable using our platform. I'll highlight a few elements on your screen and just explain what they do. So we've got our media player. So this is where you'll see our speakers today. We've got a Q&A box. So please, be really engaged, ask all the questions. We've got some really great industry professionals here who are happy to share their insights with you. We've got our slides there highlighted in the middle, related content here. So we've got some great case studies as well, so in PDF form, but also some URLs as well you should check out. Our speaker bios from Melody, Anya, Robert, Prethi, Phil, Joan, and Chris. And then a little help option if you have any issues using the platform as well. So let's get started with our first presentation. We have Melody Smith from Transport New South Wales, who will be exploring customer centricity and data to shape cities 30 years into the future. So over to you, Melody.
Hi, everybody. My name's Melody, and thank you for the introduction. So, as mentioned, I work for Transport for New South Wales, which is the government authority responsible for managing and leading the development of safe, integrated and efficient transport systems for the people of New South Wales. Some of our work involves transport planning, strategy, policy, procurement, and other non-service delivery functions across all modes of transports. So we're responsible for roads, rails, ferries, light rail, and point-to-point. Now, you might be wondering at this stage, what does this have to do with the future of AI and automation? Well, I will, through my presentation, talk about the links, I think, that are maybe different time horizons, but also the similar processes. I think you'd have to go in leveraging and bringing through any new innovation into an organization, whether it's in the next 12 months, right out into the next 30 years as well. So before we get started, I'd like to pay my respects to elders past and present and recognise and celebrate the diversity of Aboriginal people in Australia and their ongoing culture and connections to the lands and water of New South Wales. So perhaps to center this discussion, I'd like to give a little bit of context of my role at Transport. I'm a senior manager within the Design for Customer and Place team. I've been within Transport for the last 4 months. And previously, I worked in financial services for around about 8 years before and decided to make quite a switch into the public sector. The one thing I've really enjoyed of moving into the public sector is that there are very clear plans and plans way out into the future, more so than I ever found within the corporate environment. And the plan that you're looking at and the vision for Transport for New South Wales, it's really is a vision through to 2056, which again, coming from a corporate perspective, I'm not sure whether it will work towards such a time horizon. But it's a vision that looks at integrating several aspects of change that are occurring within New South Wales. So, for example, we know the population is ever expanding and increasing. We're expecting millions of new people within the greater metropolitan Sydney area in the next few years. We know that the way that we use land across the area is also changing. And we also know that there is ever increasing innovation and change when it comes to things like connected cities and making sure people are fully connected with their mobility options as well. So there's a playthrough of change, and it's the role of our team to bring that customer centricity into that future vision and planning to make sure it's aligned with the actual assets that we're developing and the technology that we're leveraging to connect those assets to our customers as well. So what's happening in New South Wales? Basically, with the current government is delivering one of the largest portfolios of infrastructure in the world, and transport plays a key role in that. When we say infrastructure, we're not only referring to the actual transport asset like the actual ferry or the train, but it's also the areas and precincts around that we're shaping and creating also communities around the transport assets as well. So the question is, with all this unprecedented pipeline of investment in infrastructure projects, especially when it's looking 30 years out, how do you deliver great customer experiences and meet expectations in this space? So I think for me, this has been a massive transformation coming from a corporate environment where you're working on predominantly digital products. I think in that space, there's very much a test, learn, iterate, and look to create an MVP, and there's much lower risks in doing that. So I would say that there's been quite a mindset shift for me in thinking 30 years out, with much fewer opportunities to take that incremental test and learn or sort of lean approach to product development. So what we've found that's really important in developing these 30-year visions is bringing that human voice and human behavioral element into the vision. We do have a lot of data modeling, so I'll take you through a framework that we use shortly. But it's really linking what are those human insights and human behaviors and human foibles or idiosyncrasies that we need to design for when planning out 30 years in the future. Also, what is also critical is getting the prototype right. And you can imagine when you're building infrastructure assets, you don't have all the opportunities in the world to create prototypes at this kind of scale that we're designing for. And also, I think one of the most challenging things is you're trying to be specific, but not too specific about what's required 30 years into the future. So you really need to future-proof those requirements through your planning processes as well. Yeah. So just a few numbers for you to give you a little bit of perspective of the sort of order of magnitude that we're dealing with. Each year, our customers take more than 424 million trips in Sydney in the intercity and regional trains, over 391 million trips on metropolitan, outer metropolitan, rural and regional buses, and 13.5 million journeys every day on Sydney's roads network. So there's over 500 million walking-only trips per year, and nearly every public transport experience starts with a walk either within the first mile or last mile of the journey to the station or stop. And walking and cycling trips contribute to 2.2 billion journeys a year. So we've got a lot of numbers and a lot of statistics and a lot of data in this space. So out to 2056, the population of New South Wales is projected or forecast to be around 12 million, which is quite an increase from what we have today. Freight volumes are almost going to be double, it's estimated. And we're also preparing for a 25% increase in regional trips across rural New South Wales. So this means for us that planning for transport's never been more important. And whilst recent events like COVID-19, which I'll talk about in a little while, have impacted demands up to 50% in some cases, and it's also impacted mobility patterns, we're still really expecting a large increase and significant demand for transport in the region. So if anybody's keen to learn more, all the details behind this are publicly available in the Transport for New South Wales Future Transport Strategy 2056. So the question for us is, and the so what, is human-centered design and customer experience predominantly in Australia has been used in digital services and apps, and also particularly in the financial services industry and insurance industry, which I've got a background in where I come from. But the question is, to what extent can you really leverage all those methods and practices as you move into something so much more concrete and so much something with a much longer time horizon and something very infrastructure based? And, you know, where did those methods and approaches add value, and where did they start to sort of break a little bit in the process and need a little bit of rethinking? So there is a lot of ambiguity and complexity when you're designing in a built environment. And so we'll go through some of that complexity in the next section. So the first section I want to go through is bringing that human vision, or the human element, to future planning and future casting and data modeling as well. So this is a model that we work towards in transport, and I think it's broadly applicable whether you're working to a 30-year time horizon or a 12-month horizon. Generally, as I said, we do have that vision out into the future, and that's a vision developed by government, and a lot of that is around shaping places and placemaking into the future. And a lot of that vision is supported by data modeling and forecasting. So if you are an enthusiast of data, there's plenty to play with at Transport. So we have a lot of information where people tap in, tap off. We even can, measure the axle change in trains depending on the number of passengers. You name it, we've got it in terms of data. And a lot of the modelling that we have is out into that 30-year vision. And it does factor in changes to land use, plan changes to different communities. And you can see the important role it has in either supporting that vision in terms of our plans, or actually creating new behaviours as well. So we've found in this process, when you're talking 30 years into the future, it's quite easy to get carried away with government plans. And what can sometimes get a little bit lost in the process is bringing that back to, okay, human behaviours and human elements. So we can't think about customers as a whole single entity, which sometimes happens in this process, but we really have to think and bring it down to observable behavioural patterns that we can see today, and also different customer types. And a large part of our process is anchoring that future vision back to the present and what we can see today in people's behaviour, because there's a few things that don't change over time. I think you can factor that land use generally changes more slowly over time. Also, humans' ingrained behaviour and patterns also take a little while to change over time. And the other thing we're looking to do is to see and identify what we call markers of change we can see in people's behaviour that might indicate future behavioural patterns or trends, and also how people's engagement with technology will change over the future. So when we're working on these future strategies, we're thinking this through different human aspects and different behavioural profiles as well, to make sure that it's a great plan in the future, but also we've really thought through what does that mean for the person on the ground, the community on the ground as well. So part of this is digging beneath the surface. So there's a lot of thought leadership in this area coming from the UK, particularly Transport for London. And they're starting to draw on a lot of thinking that's come from behavioural psychology, where we think about the role of a human or a person, whether they follow the traditional economic patterns of behaviour based on supply and demand, and pulling that across to create this sort of really unpick some of the conventional wisdom and thinking in the transport space that's been there for a very long time. So when we're working with transport planners in our strategic business cases, a lot of the time, a lot of attention goes to the network, conveyances or vehicles, stabling, headway. I've been learning a whole new language, but it's very much on the technical aspects. And there's been a sort of a long-running fallacy within transport planning that, that travel time is essentially time wasted. And the only option to make it better is to speed it up or cut it out. And so that's been the sort of central and core underpinning part of the process. But actually, in looking at behavioural psychology, we're starting to challenge some of that conventional wisdom that, we only had to think about how fast the trains go or buses go and how frequently do they go. And, if we sort of boiled it down in other contexts to, it's just how fast can you go? If we went into the hotel sector, you'd only be looking at how many beds can we productively put in and cram as many people into the hotel. Or, if you looked at a cafe or a restaurant, you'd be looking at it solely as the means of distributing calories to the broader population. And, healthcare, maybe if we just looked at promoting longevity rather than managing pain, we feel that in transport, for a long time, people have really focused on very sort of single dimension indicators of success. And we're really trying to bring in, okay, so if a person's on a train for a long time, is that always seen as such unproductive time? And how can we support a customer to feel a little bit more productive in that process? So that's a lot. We're trying to dig into what, people might need to interchange in their transport, and that's not perceived to be a great option. How do we make that better for them? And, what are their actual behavior versus what our planned theories are about how they'll behave? Will they actually change from a bus to a train or another train to a train? Or will they stay on the train they are, even if it takes longer, just so they can keep their seat and feel a little bit more productive in their time? So that's one of the human elements that we've been looking at bringing into the process. And the other one, as I mentioned earlier, we're really trying to understand what we call markers of change. So we're trying to look at the moment at what trends and behaviours are emerging in our current society, and how we can use it, sort of this early signalling to make plans into the future as well. So I think there's a famous science fiction writer called William Gibson, and his famous quote was, "The future is already here, it's just not evenly distributed." So we're looking for what that future is and how we can see it in the communities. So I think one of the biggest examples of that early marker of change that's impacted transport in recent years has been that shift to working from home and remote working technology. And of course, pre-COVID, we could see that there was that facilitation of new technology into providing Zoom or Teams to work from home, but still, as a societal change, we hadn't quite flipped to accepting that as a permanent state of being, that people would work from home. But it was really that COVID that created a seismic change to our broader society in a way that we couldn't predict, but you could see that earlier marker of change. And it's really impacted the way that we travel as well, which is something probably not anticipated, that remote video conferencing is now almost a competing transport mode to the ones that we provide as Transport for New South Wales as well. So other things we're thinking about are climate change factors as well, and how that's going to change customers' behaviour with the increasing heat patterns, particularly out in Western Sydney, and also increased rain. How's that impacting people's propensity to go out into the environment and move from A to B? And we're really trying to understand that and also help shape the neighbourhoods that are conducive for people to be comfortable in that process as well. So that's some of the ways that we're really trying to bring that customer or behavioural element. It's really looking at their behaviours to really test out planning assumptions. And it's also looking for early indicators about how our customers' behaviours might change in the future. So another element of what we're looking to do in this process is getting the prototype right. So I come from a world where you could create paper prototypes and rip them up, and that was all encouraged, or, it was all low fidelity to increasing high fidelity was the theory, at least. But in the physical space, it's quite different to prototype physical things. The infrastructure elements that we do create are actually set in stone, and the prototypes that we develop are also usually quite costly to create. So you almost have to prototype like your life depends upon it. Because if we screw up with that investment, even to the prototype, we want to make sure we're making good use of government funds and public money as well. So we're trying to really think, how do we future-proof the more expensive asset, but also how do we get the best value out of our current prototype as well? And within that, yes, there's not really opportunities to create an A/B test with where you place the lifts. For example, here in our new train station that links into Barangaroo from Wynyard. So you can't sort of rearrange things and then put them back based on customer feedback. Once they're there, they're pretty much going to be there for the next eternity. So where do we have the opportunity to help shape this in the process? This is the planning process as we currently use it. And you think in all of that most of our time is spent in planning and development and procurement. But actually the biggest time is spent in delivery, and this can take up to 5 years in the process. But within this planning and development stage, we do have the opportunities for prototype. It's just that once we do prototype and then define our requirements into procurement, that starts to get quite locked in when you're dealing with multi-billion-dollar contracts and external providers. So here's some examples of where we have prototyped with customers. And this is one of the new intercity trains that we were exploring in 2018. And we prototyped a whole train carriage actually in the process. And some of the things that we learned in that process is what looks good in a CAD design or on paper when you transfer that into the real physical space. You can explore where places of the experience fall over. So for example, with this prototype, we found that when the train braked suddenly, that luggage would come flying out of the overhead storage lockers or areas. So that was something we were able to adjust in the planning process for longer term change as well. But again, the money required to create such a prototype is significant. So you really need to plan and really get the prototype right and get that commitment from all the stakeholders that we're working with. And I think the other interesting thing in moving into transport is the degree to which so many different design disciplines are integrated together in the process. So you're also working with other designers from other disciplines as well in that process. So some things to consider for us have really been, there is a need to engage with customers and end users as early as possible because we don't have many opportunities. And when we do get the opportunity to build that physical prototype, we damn well want to make sure we get it right. We absolutely want to use the absolute best practice in prototyping because there's a lot at stake. Going back to that public money question. And there are a lot of competing interests. If you think it's not just transport, looking at the planning process, there are many other government bodies that we need to engage with an interagency process as well. So we need to make sure that everybody's interests can come and are aligned in that as well. So far we've covered really embedding the customer insights, making the best use of prototyping when you do get to have that opportunity. And then how we translate that into actually getting the outcome in the longer term is a lot of our work is to think about customer outcomes. And we really need to make sure we're focused and clear on what customer outcomes we want in 30 years' time, not knowing necessarily what the technology sitting behind that will be. So we know technology evolves and changes. Industry best practices get developed over the time. We're constantly looking overseas for best practice in this area. And so we need to think about what outcome we want for the customer. And I think a good example of this for anybody in Sydney who's used the Opal card, we didn't necessarily predict the use of contactless payments with mobile phones and cards, but we're able able to flex around that change in societal behaviour, but it was really around creating an option for customers to pay with ease that we were focused on in the longer term as well. So going back to this planning model, a lot of our work comes in the stage 1 and 2 around the needs analysis and investment decision and working alongside the team to make sure that's represented into the procurement process. We do a lot of requirements writing. And again, within these, we're trying to make these as solution agnostic as possible and make sure the customer voice and their needs, and not just as a homogenous group, but actually as a sort of broken down group, and to different user personas, profiles and needs are actually reflected into that process, because we don't know what's going to come into the future either. And we definitely need to stay relevant in the future as well. So we're also looking for input from industry leaders who are managing these technologies to tell us and inform us where that sort of future direction is going, with connected cities, for example, and what best practices are in that space. So to wrap up, perhaps before we go into questions, is going back to that point earlier, human-centered design has been used very well in the .com boom, also in Silicon Valley. In Australia, it's really used in quite a widespread way across the financial services industry and large corporates. But, in coming to a much different environment, it's really caused me to critically examine the validity of those tools, especially as we have such large budgets, high risk, and effectively it's been a space where I can see you have much more control of the overall outcome, and you're designing to create new experiences and new environments for people. And in that process, you do have a lot more control, perhaps, than working in environments where, you have to work around regulatory or in harmony with regulatory requirements, for example. So, yeah, we think at Transport that design and customer experience has a lot to add to the process, and we're certainly contributing that at the moment. And I think that's pretty much the end of my presentation, and I wonder if there's any questions from the floor.
Thanks so much, Melody. We have had a question come in. Anusha, thanks so much for your question. Anusha says, for service industry, prototype would be pilot testing, right? Or rather, how different would it be if the product is intangible?
Can you repeat that question? Sorry.
Yeah, of course. For service industry, prototype would be pilot testing, right? Or rather, how different would it be if the product was intangible?
So coming from the services industry, I think of making an MVP and using that as a pilot for an experience. And again, you're trying to not put too much investment into that, because you pilot it, but it's really with a view to learning what are all the elements that you need to think about to make that successful, rather than testing the validity of that idea per se. Within this environment, an infrastructure environment, a pilot I don't think exists quite so much. Is when you build it, it's in there, and any changes that you have to make subsequent to that implementation can cost millions, if not billions of dollars as well. So we very much try to avoid that as well. I hope that's answered your question.
Yeah, great answer. I think that's answered it. And then we've got a question come in from Callum, who says, how do you develop your personas? Are they entirely data-driven, or are they intuitively designed?
That is a great question, actually. So we've got a tremendous sort of body of research, and we've got data-driven and quantitative customer segments or segmentation that's been created. And we also, from project to project, depending on time, budget, etc., look to create more nuanced profiles for that particular area. And I think the largest thing for me is realizing how local a lot of our work does, and understanding that local context and bringing that local element into your personas or profiles is really important. So depending where we are in the process, we'll start on a slightly more, idealized or conceptual personas that we can see based on previous segmentation and also work that we've done in other areas. But as we get closer to delivery, there's a much larger degree of community engagement and qualitative research that goes into those to really understand the people in the community as well.
Okay, great. That's a great answer there. And we also have one more question here from Marcin. Thanks for your question, Marcin. And they say, do you believe your approach is any different to airline/auto industries? If so, how?
Ooh, that's a good question. Look, I'll be honest, I've never worked in the airline or in auto industry, so I'd probably have to think about that. But I think for me, airline industry, also the R&D budget to get or deliver new products to market for that is substantial. And the risk and the consequences if they get that wrong and there's a problem with the plane are monumental as well in terms of cost and your brand and from a PR perspective. So I think in that perspective, I think airlines particularly are very high profile in the public eye, and so are infrastructure projects. And I think what's interesting in infrastructure projects is if you get it right, people generally never talk about it. If you get it wrong, people will definitely have a lot to say, and there's a lot of public opinion, and you're very broadly exposed. So I think that's sort of the similarities. In terms of developing up prototypes and bringing in that human context to the airline industry, I do have some knowledge of Air New Zealand, for example. You might have picked the Kiwi accent. I know that they do bring a large design component into planning their new Dreamliners, or I think might be a Qantas one. I have to be careful on that. But thinking about, that long distance travel and how people want to interact and, turning seats into beds or even creating a rentable sleeping area, I think in the future as well. So I think they're also trying to bring in that more human element.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. We've got one more question come in. It's just a quick one because, we are maybe running out of time a little bit. So one last one, which is from Francesca. Thank you so much for your question. And they say, how do you work with other departments when having to address land use?
Oh, that's a good question as well. That's very sensitive, honestly, because a lot of the land use is where people are living and it's their livelihoods. And, if we're looking to use a corridor or protect an area, that can create a very long time of uncertainty for people. Uncertainty about what's happening, uncertainty about their largest asset as well. So there is a significant amount of work and effort that goes into community consultation, from holding community events down to door knocking to make sure people are aware of what's happening, engage with them, make sure everybody is in the know and well communicated with. And I understand, although I haven't done it myself, that as projects get into that delivery stage, our designers will also join up in that process as well and go into those community engagement sessions and sort of hearing the customer voice when it comes to those land use changes as well, and trying to design for that and make that a pleasant experience as possible for them.
Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you so much for your time today, Melody. It was an incredibly interesting presentation, and thanks so much for answering those questions at the end there. I'm sure everyone's really enjoyed themselves.
Thank you. Thank you very much. It was lovely to be here. Thank you.
Thanks so much. So before we move on to our next presentation, we just wanted to give you a first reveal on our new initiative our team have been doing behind the scenes. It's a community hub for our CX community, which is being done in collaboration with our customer show team. So I'm just going to show you a video which it kind of explains it a little bit further. Okay, so that's just a reminder that if anyone wants to consume any of these presentations again, we will have them hosted on CX Unplugged. So make sure you sign up and stay in the loop for its launch, which will be in the next couple of weeks. And I believe they'll also have an interview with the UX team from NASA for the launch. So before we move on to our next presentation, we also have a poll that we'd like to ask you. So in your business, why do you think customers keep coming back? Is it because of A, the product you sell, B, your marketing and brand strategies, C, your customer service, or D, your ability to personalize the customer journey? Submit your answer through there and we'll look at the poll results in just a moment. I'll give you about 20 seconds. Okay, let's look at those responses. So at the largest percent, oh no, we've got a tie. So between the products you sell and your customer service, both at 37.1%. And then following that, we've got your ability to personalize the customer journey at 17.1% and your marketing and brand strategies at 8.6%. So we'll move on to our next presentation from Anya from Hootsuite. Anya will be discussing social trends in customer care. Over to you, Anya.
Awesome. Thanks, Alex. Just go ahead here. So yeah, I'm here to discuss social media trends in customer care, AI and automations, and how they're really the future of the customer experience. On average, Australians spend almost 2 hours per day on social media. And from a technological standpoint, we've seen a real shift in recent years towards the digital experience and the time that we spend on social media being a huge part of the customer experience. And I'm sure most of you here already know this or can agree with that. But looking at this from a customer service perspective, I think the foundation of customer experience is still very much the same. Humans still want to connect with humans who empathize with them and their problems. And the challenge that a lot of organizations are facing now is how can you digitally connect with customers? There we go. So first, a quick introduction. My name is Anya, and I'm the marketing strategist for Hootsuite in Australia and New Zealand. For those of you that aren't familiar with Hootsuite, we are experts in social media management, social customer care, and social selling, and we empower organizations to strategically grow their brand, their businesses, and their customer relationships using social media. So going back to the challenge I just mentioned, how do we connect with customers digitally, but ultimately give them a human personalized experience? We're going to be talking a bit about the digital transformation that we've seen accelerated by the pandemic, some trends on customers' expectations for customer care, and how AI and automations can actually enhance your customer's experience. So there's no question that the way that we work has fundamentally changed because of the pandemic. A lot of organizations were forced to find really quick ways to implement digital solutions for our new remote working conditions. And 2 years on, this is still our reality. According to a McKinsey digital study, the pandemic launched businesses and consumers 5 years forward in terms of their digital acceleration in only a matter of around 8 weeks. So on one hand, our quote unquote new normal is a bit of a blessing. So a lot of us are spending less time commuting. We have the flexibility to continue working from home. But on the other hand, it's not the same as physically being together and having that human experience. One example we've seen is that the pandemic drove the demand for in-person services like consultations to be offered virtually. But once the world started to open up, these virtual services still ended up being helpful to some potential customers, especially the people working from home, because it was easier to fit into their schedule. But this is also true in regards to customers reaching out to businesses via social media and messaging channels. We're at a point where we need to find a balance offline customer experience as we move primarily from being online during lockdowns to now finding our new balance. And the stats to back this up and back up the need for a strong digital customer experience don't lie. Over 2.7 billion people use messaging apps frequently globally. 66.4% of Australian internet users access Facebook Messenger on a monthly basis, and this makes it the second most used social media platform in the country. 64% of consumers would rather message a business than call it, and 60% of all customer service engagements will be delivered via digital or web self-service channels, so social media, chat apps, and live chat by 2023. So these numbers really show the shift in online behaviors and platforms that customers are using to engage with brands. And there are also increased expectations that we have when connecting with brands. So companies are taking messaging a lot more seriously. Data AI reveals that WhatsApp Business was the 10th most downloaded mobile app over the past 3 months. And in addition to Facebook Messenger being the second most used social media platform in Australia, it's also the third most favorite social media platform in the country. And Meta has revealed that more than 1 billion people message with the business each week on WhatsApp, Facebook Messenger, and Instagram. So whether it's DMing a business or browsing product catalogs, asking for support, or interacting with somebody's stories, it's really clear that audiences are embracing these messaging apps, and it creates a really unique opportunity for brands to double down on customer care and provide customer service through social messaging channels. So I think that's a really good segue into talking about what customer and later on how it can help address these expectations. So from a business perspective, the number of digital channels that are now available can be a bit overwhelming, and so is the speed that users move between platforms and channels during a single user journey. Customer journeys are really complex, with shoppers switching channels multiple times as they go from awareness through to consideration through to purchase. On average, Australians access 6.1 different social platforms per month. And the data that we have about our customers on these different platforms should follow them across the channels. Customers don't mind switching channels so long as their issue is resolved in one continuous interaction and they don't have to repeat themselves. So you can see from this chart here that to a customer, switching channels isn't complex at all. To them, the differentiation between online or offline, owned and not owned, marketing or e-commerce, it doesn't really matter. What guides their journey is their own task or goal, and they expect to be able to go wherever it leads them. So this means that making sure that wherever a customer finds you, whether it's in store, on a tablet maybe, on a third-party reseller's website, your own website, or in store, they meet a recognizable and consistent presence that enables them to pick the thread up of their journey and continue it smoothly. So going back to that recent digital shift we've seen in customer care, it's really forced a rethinking of what the customer experience actually means. And what we found is that what customers value most in their customer experience is speed, convenience, knowledgeable help, and friendly service. It's not just enough to examine the customer journey and look at satisfaction metrics. You need to really address what customers want and need. I keep coming back to this online-offline experience because the truth is that one channel to the next, and they no longer distinguish between online and offline. They also don't distinguish between customer support, your social teams, or your marketing teams on social. They only see your brand, and they expect their issue or their question to be resolved in that one continuous, seamless interaction. So if we're thinking about some suggestions for rising to the top in customer experience and improving customer experiences with your brand, it all goes back to creating that human connection that customers want and making sure that you have a personalized experience for them that resonates across all of your digital channels, which is otherwise known as the omni-channel approach. And research shows that brands with strong omni-channel customer engagement strategies retain an average of 89% of their customers. That's in comparison to 33% of companies with weak strategies. So digital customer experience needs to incorporate multiple channels, all working towards the same goal, which is delivering customer satisfaction no matter what their journey is. And having that omni-channel customer care strategy in place helps you to meet those customer expectations for speed, convenience, knowledgeable help, and friendly service across the numerous digital channels they're accessing and connecting with your brand. So the future of customer experience is to differentiate, not to commoditize. And the rise of the digital experience that I've just touched on means that businesses now have to have a customer experience strategy, but they're not all going to have the same customer experience strategy. One of the key findings in Hootsuite's Social Trends 2022 report was about how social marketers have saved their brands from the quote unquote customer service apocalypse. So to sum this up, with the major shift to digitally engaging with brands, customers were fed up with waiting on hold and figured out that customer service delivered by social media channels is immediate, with as many digital customer service channels as possible. Like I said earlier, Australians are accessing over 6 different social media channels per month. So businesses now really see the value of social as a vital customer service channel, with 59% of the respondents of our Social Trends 2022 survey agreeing that social customer care has increased in value for their organization. And when looking at the technology that can help support your customer experience strategy, it should act as a partner and not just a tool with a list of features. So the first step is understanding your different digital touch points and how they affect your customer perception and your brand loyalty. And then the experience you create on digital channels or your customer experience should then be a differentiator for your business. So I've been talking now a lot about what makes a strong digital customer experience. So we could put it into like 3 fundamental ingredients. The first one being success. Did the customer complete their task and did they achieve their goal? The second, was the process smooth and easy? What was the effort required? And the third ingredient is emotion. Did they come away from the interaction feeling good? The third one is easily the most powerful, and this continues to tie back to the customer experience, that humans want to connect with humans who empathize with them and understand their problems. So I think this quote sums it up pretty nicely. I may not remember everything you said, but I'll never forget how you made me feel. I'm sure everyone here has had experiences with customer care with a brand that changed your perception either for better or for worse. And over time, we might not remember the exact words or even like the context of the conversation, but the perception that you're left with about that brand, that's what sticks. And I think that while the world is becoming more and more digital, it doesn't mean that we can't. Oh, sorry, I just had my computer just froze. All right, so AI and automations. I've talked a lot about the human experience in customer care and how that plays a huge role in the future of customer experience. So where do AI and automations come into play? So since organizations are now expected to meet consumers where they are, that's at home, on social media, and then also dealing with that increased volume of messages coming through, the entire customer experience has shifted, with customer support moving from that traditional brick and mortar or call center model to direct messaging. So how can a brand be present for customers 24/7 and do this while streamlining time, money, and resources? Customers don't just care about products and prices, they want to feel connection, but you can't create those human connections if you're busy answering routine inquiries. So this is where automations and bots come to the rescue. AI and automations allow you to handle messaging conversations in both an efficient and intelligent way when customers want one-on-one support. So in simple terms, conversational AI allows computers to act like humans, providing human responses through chatbots or virtual assistants, whereas automations and bots provide assistance in terms of automatically detecting a message's language, sending automated responses to maybe frequently asked questions, providing messages outside of business hours, and then manually assigning topics to conversations. So the real question is, how do you use these tools to accelerate your customer's experience without losing the human touch? So thinking back to the ingredients of a strong digital CX, success, effort, and emotion, automations and AI can help you achieve all 3, and some human representative when needed. So this really marries together the personalization and human touch with the experience of automation. If you take it one step further with having conversational AI, This allows computers to respond to humans like humans. And this means that brands can connect with customers through chatbots, virtual assistants, because the power of AI gives computers the ability to derive context from conversations and generate thoughtful responses. So this can help you manage expectations around your response times and improve your customer experience. So an example of a Heyday by Hootsuite customer who put conversational AI into practice was Decathlon UK. So they're a fitness retailer, and they obviously saw a surge in online orders and customer queries via Facebook Messenger during lockdowns. So to reduce the workload on teammates and to support online customers, Decathlon worked with Heyday to integrate a virtual assistant with Messenger, automating 65% of customer requests. So by doing this, they not only saw their overall CSAT scores raise 10 points up to 92%, they saw a 25% increase in teammate productivity and a 25% decrease in support costs in only 6 months. So another example is integrating with your CRM. And this gives your agents and social media managers a 360-degree view of your customer and allows them to use that information to personalize the experience, both in person and through automations. So another benefit is providing maybe personalized product recommendations based on each customer, providing them with a more tailored experience, and helping to increase sales and save time for the retailer. Like I said earlier, your customers are on multiple channels and the data should follow them channel to channel, and you can use this to enhance their experience. So an example of a customer of ours that does this is Argenta. They're a Belgian bank, and they receive, so users are automatically identified and their information is shared with the agent via their contact attributes. So then the agents are able to use more information about the client by searching their user ID, which is linked to their CRM. So this allows them to validate the identity of the user and then immediately solve their problems and answer questions even faster. And this has resulted in their customer satisfaction score of 80%. And thirdly, automations can allow you to automatically route conversations to the right agents with the right skills. So again, this combines that experience of automated with human connection. So this means that you're providing them with a timely answer, but also giving them the option for a human experience if their question requires a bit more one-on-one support. Additionally, if you've got that integrated CRM experience, then you can use the data behind that conversation and prioritize them accordingly. A customer of ours that has done this really well is Kareem. They are essentially the Uber of the Middle East, and they have teams working across different objectives and different regions. So their business uses tags to identify issues, to plot trends, and to share reports across the business. So their messages are immediately tagged, routed, and prioritized based on the tags, which resulted in cutting through the excess of inbound messages and allowed their agents to see the messages in their inbox that really needed their focus while allowing the automated answers to handle the rest. So all of these different tactics can just show you how you can respond to your customers in a more efficient way, but also personally. So going back to the third ingredient of a strong digital customer experience, which is that emotion side of things, it's still the most powerful element. So what I'm trying to say is that humans turn your automated solutions like conversational AI should learn from the human interactions. So those experiences will improve. So in terms of conversational AI, it works behind the scenes to kind of unpack meaning behind the data and use statistics to make predictions about customer needs from their messages and then generate a thoughtful response back. So it can make it feel like you're having a real conversation with a real person while also allowing you to be present with your customers 24/7. So when we talk about the new customer journey, I really want to stress that the future of customer experience is personalization, not over automation. So personalized experiences aren't the result of automating everything. They're the result of businesses actively choosing what to automate and what not to automate. A trend that we've seen, and I keep coming back to this, is that customers are getting more accustomed to that seamless mix of digital and human interaction. And I think we should all remember that AI and automations are an enhancement and not a replacement for human interaction. So if we were to put this into practice, maybe using like a hospitality example, say you have a customer that books a hotel room. You might send out some proactive messaging confirming their booking, and then the day of that, send them a proactive message to let them know how to get there, maybe some directions and information on where to park. But then introduce them to your Facebook Messenger concierge, where they can speak to a person and contact you for questions they might have about their stay, so maybe making restaurant reservations. So really what you should be doing is aiming to level the playing field across all of your different digital touch points. And this goes back to standardizing the quality of experience you provide your customers, regardless of where or how they engage with you. And this is really where AI and automations come into support urgently, giving customers a standardized, seamless experience across the platforms they're already connecting with you on, without forgetting about the option to add that human element. So gone through a lot in the last 20 minutes, so I wanted to give some actionable takeaways or things to consider when thinking about the future of your customer experience strategy. So the first one is to be transparent. If you're looking to give your customers an enhanced experience with your brand, you should be firstly collecting feedback on their experiences. And when you are collecting feedback, use it to improve their experience and communicate how you're doing that. So an example of this could be offering a survey at the end of a conversation with a chatbot or with an agent on social. Because improving customer experiences is something that any audience really appreciates, and it's something that you should and can communicate with them about, because when you implement their feedback, customers know that you care. So this is going to help your audience to understand the values and priorities you have as a brand and encourage them to offer more feedback in the future. So the next thing to recommend is to close the loop and embrace your frustrated customers. You want to be following up with the customers who have offered feedback about maybe a negative experience, because this goes back to that earlier quote I shared. I may not remember everything you said, but I'll never forget how you made me feel. Negative experiences with brands and the perception that it leaves customers with, that sticks. Only 1 out of every 26 unhappy customers complain, and the rest churn. So this is a really big lesson for organizations about the absence of feedback as a sign of customer satisfaction. Just adding a few more stats onto this, because I really want to stress the importance of listening to negative feedback. 42% of customers who complain on social expect a response within an hour. Customer advocacy for your brand by up to 50%. So connecting with customers who offered negative feedback and making sure that you're there for them 24/7 can be a really powerful way to put a bad experience into a good one and to preserve and even strengthen those relationships with your customers. Next, you're going to want to look to continually improve. The new customer journey is something that all organizations are still learning, and you don't have to master it all in one day. So continuing to test and understand your customer journeys and the different digital interactions you have with them, especially as you become more immersed in AI and automations. You really want to track the outcome of your conversations and use this to optimize teams' performance. This goes back to collecting and utilizing your customer feedback. This can allow you to track your metrics and evaluate how your customer experience is improving time over time. So you can review those conversations you're having with your customers, both automated and personal, to review how you communicate and where you can improve. And with the right approach, you can also deflect inquiry volume from your human agents and then enable them to focus on delivering more personalized and meaningful interactions. And lastly, you can take a long-term mindset. It's really okay to take a phased approach. Digital customer experience strategy means creating a major ongoing program of improvements. They all have the goal, though, of increasing that customer lifetime value. You need to recognize the scale and the time span, as well as the potential for improvements, and be aware that the investments you make and the changes you begin to implement may not show results immediately, and you might need leadership buy-in for your program. So it's not just changing processes, you're changing the culture of how you engage with your customer. Instead, you're going to be building a framework for continually improving, adapting, and excelling in a changing. So you can start small and then expand. So digital is a really key battleground that we're all in our new experience economy. And there's a lot of opportunities to delight and interact with your customers. So the platforms and different ways to engage with customers in the digital world is going to only increase in the years ahead, making your customer experience and digital transformation critical to the ongoing success of a lot of businesses. A lot can happen in a short time. Think back to the statistics I shared at the beginning, that the pandemic launched consumers and businesses 5 years forward in terms of their digital acceleration in a matter of only 8 weeks. So digital acceleration has definitely gone up a few notches, and the social media landscape as well is constantly changing. So throughout the constant transformation, the analysis of data is going to help you understand why and how customers choose to engage with you. And this is going to then allow you to personalize and resolve issues as they arise, because personalization and speed are what a great digital customer experience has and always will be about. So that is the end of my presentation. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks so much, Anya. That was so interesting. I find it really interesting that 42% of complaints on social media, they expect a response within an hour, which is, you know, it's insane. It's quick. You've got to be quick on the keyboard with those. So thank you so much. We haven't had any questions come through as of yet. We did have a question clarifying the company over in the Middle East. Was it Careem, did you say?
Yeah, Careem, C-A-R-E-E-M.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for your time. If we have any questions come through later on, we'll hopefully have Anya to answer them, you know, when she is free. But thank you so much for your time today, Anya.
Awesome. Thanks, Alex. Thanks, everyone.
All right, moving forward. So, beg your pardon, we've had a little change in the next session's context. So we've got Robert, the Director of Design Strategy at ANZ, who will be exploring AI and CX, the balance between human and digital in disrupting traditional models of CX. Robert, are you here?
I am. Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Excellent. Oh, it's a pleasure to be here. I caught the last part of that session. It was actually really, really good. And I've worked personally with a few of the people speaking today, so I can actually speak to the quality of the information everyone's getting as well. So it's of high caliber. I just hope I can meet the same standards.
Of course you can. Over to you.
Cool. Welcome, everyone. So we bounced a few topics around before this presentation started. And ultimately where we kind of landed was talking about the relationship between AI and CX and that inevitable synergy between data, design, and technology. And as I kind of started to go through this presentation, I thought about this more and more. So the original idea and what we're going to talk about today is really around our current digital ecosystems and really how it all works together, how you pull together the human factor that's oftentimes associated with design, but also the distribution of that in modern channels and also data as well, because data ultimately and fundamentally underlies everything we do. And if it doesn't, it should. So as we kind of start to go through this, the thing that I kind of realized as I was building this presentation out, and you'd think I would have known it earlier, considering I talk about it every day, is there's no one-size-fits-all solution. And a lot of times we go to these seminars and conferences and we hope to have what's effectively a kind of, you know, a silver bullet where someone stands on stage or on a screen and says, here's how you should run your business, here's what you should do. And the fact is it really isn't realistic and it doesn't really work. So one thing I really want to point out here is that it's complex. And the fact is that you need to be, scared. You need to be afraid of the ecosystem, beware the ecosystem, but also be aware of the ecosystem. And what that really means in simple terms is no one solution can be taken without a holistic lens. And oftentimes we do. You know, we're all subject matter experts, whether it be in customer experience, whether it be in call center operations, whether it be in financing, whether it be in regulations, whatever it is. But ultimately, every aspect of how an organization works tends to impact other parts of it. And a simplistic view that oftentimes take is a view based on our own needs as employees or employers, as managers, of staff, of the organization, and our customers. And that's the kind of lens that oftentimes gets pitched. The problem with that view or that perspective is that it's not that simple. It's not just you, it's not just your organization, it's not the staff, it's not the customers. It's a lot more than that. Think about your partners, think about the data required, the metrics involved in not just understanding why you do things, but how you do things, how you measure the success, how that's then pitched back as a business case back to executive, how executive then justifies its success for ongoing funding or investment. Your family, your finances on a personal note, job security, change management, management of information systems. It's a complex ecosystem. And so then this oftentimes simplistic view that we have around, I'll improve customer experience by, rolling out AI or, voice recognition or some sort of machine learning, or by improving the UX of an application. It doesn't hold water. And oftentimes the criticism you get, because my background is technology and design, the criticism oftentimes you get as a designer is that what you're proposing is either takes too long, hasn't been, so therefore, if you take less time, it tends to be less thought out. And the criticism oftentimes you get as a technologist is that what you've put together doesn't tick all the boxes. And the reason oftentimes is because the entire ecosystem has been considered. We haven't considered the impact on the business and the customer and our customers. And that's part of this whole thing that we need to consider. So what does that mean in real terms? Well, again, like I said before, there isn't any one-size-fits-all solution. So as I was putting this together, we talked about having specific topics to discuss, and the kind of burning questions at that point were: should we use AI and automation to improve personalization? Yeah, probably. How can biometrics, self-service, audiovisual content enable customers with a faster, more self-sufficient journey? I know at ANZ, where I work, it's a hot topic of conversation. Everyone wants to be able to build self-servicing to some degree, or automation or machine learning. Will investing in new technology provide long-term ROI? Well, yeah, maybe. We'll talk about that. And the last part is, what are the new ways to integrate digital experiences to improve customer satisfaction? Well, again, there are a million things you can do, but the question is, who are you servicing? What's the customer problem? I saw a bit of the other presentations that are on today as well. I think a few of those topics get more of a deep dive and a kind of better look. But I've taken a more holistic and I suppose ecosystem level approach to this, rather than just servicing a specific customer problem or how you build it into the organization or how you pitch it back for funding. It's really, I suppose, I hope it's useful to you, a much broader look at this. And oftentimes we do things like consider, let's say, in our third point there about technology, we consider technology as being a fix-all. It's not a fix-all. It's a tool in your tool shed. Your mate's come over to borrow your lawnmower, but maybe he needs or she needs a whippersnipper as well. That whippersnipper could be data. They might need some fertilizer. Well, you might have a bag of fertilizer in your shed as well. All these things are tools. And the bigger your tool shed and the better you know how to use those tools, the better you're able to apply them to fix your lawn or apply it to a customer or organizational problem. And that really is the secret to how you innovate. It's knowing which tool to use, in what combination, where to apply it, and applying the right tools at the right time as part of an overarching strategy or an overarching plan for how you're going to fix your lawn or apply those tools in your tool shed. So when I take a step back at this, and in my role as a head of strategy or strategic design, we oftentimes consider all these things together as innovation. Any new improvement you do ultimately is a form of innovation, and there are different kinds of innovation, and I'll dig into those a bit more. But effectively, there are 5 steps to this. You need to have an innovation strategy, and that strategy needs to be aligned to business goals. You need to understand and analyze your innovation types, because there are different types of innovation, and each of these innovations require different processes and different levels of funding and commitment from the business. but also they need to service a customer or organizational problem. If you haven't identified that problem up front, you're innovating just for the sake of innovating, and that seldom, if ever, returns a positive return. You need to be able to service innovation. So are you able to invest in technology if that's the answer? Are you able to effectively mandate process change? Are you able to upskill, right-size your workforce? And then the ultimate end of this is, when you finish your innovation process, what do you do then? Do you continually innovate? Do you review what's been done at a quarterly, yearly, biannually cycle? How do you measure when you stop innovating? So these are the things we're actually going to dig into today. So on that first point, really the first step is to understand, and assuming that, this applies to whether or not what you want to do from an innovation perspective, from a automation, AI, design perspective. It applies to mature and immature organizations. It applies to organizations that do or don't have processes in place already. And the first step really is to understand the appetite for innovation. So this can be done organizationally. And if you're starting from a point where your organization isn't particularly innovative or has no formal innovation function, ask yourself these questions, and ask these questions of the leadership and the teams within the organization. What does the organization aspire to be? Do you want to scale? Do you want to discover? Do you need to evolve? Are you able to mobilize your sales teams, your technology, design, service teams? Do you have a portfolio of products or initiatives that are ripe for innovation? These are all questions, and they're not easy questions to answer without really having an honest view as to what the organization is ready to do. But it's important to do, because understanding the organizational appetite for innovation, and this flows down to customers too, understanding what the appetite for innovation is should then feed into how prepared you are, or your project or initiative is, to be funded. How prepared you are to be able to choose the right kinds of innovation pointers or change pointers to know where to apply it and how to apply it. That's your first step. Your first step is really to understand what that appetite is. Pressing the wrong button here. The second step is to really understand what that innovation mix is. So far you've understood what the appetite is, but now you need to think about, what is it that you do? Are you innovating for configuration? And there are 10 items here. Configuration, that includes things like really organizational things, so profit models, network, so do you have partners that you deal with? Structure, so organizational structure, or process, all the kind of meat and bones that kind of sits the background that your customers don't see, that ultimately will affect your customer experience, and ultimately affect, based on a number of other factors in the next section, how you apply that innovation and how you fund it. So what are your offerings? Are you looking to improve the performance of your product or service? Are you looking to build out a system or an ecosystem of products and services? So again, if you look at banking, home loans, how do home loans relate to personal loans? How do personal loans relate to investment loans? How many people who are first home buyers, or who are home buyers or mortgage owners, also have a business? Are they a business owner, homeowner, or are they what we call affectionately a boho? They're complementary products, which ultimately should create complementary ecosystems of services. And then those services, so how do you service the products and services you have? Do you have call centers? Do you have fleets of salespeople? Do you have different channels to communicate on? They're all areas they can innovate in. And again, if we use our example of AI or machine learning or data, how do those ecosystems of products and services work together? How do you get a true information systems view on how these things gel together? And experiences. This is the part where people talk about design or innovation they most oftentimes think about. How do you improve your website or your mobile channels? How do you market? How do you communicate? What does your brand look like? Is it the same at every channel? Is your brand speaking the same way to different audiences? Should it have to? How do you go about your customer engagement? Again, going back to channels, going back to servicing, and all these things are different places or different ways that you can actually build a mix of innovation. And oftentimes you'll find that, based on what your organization's appetite is for innovation, it'll be focused on 2 or 3 or 4 or 5, a number of these specific items, of these items in the mix. So they're your first 2 steps. Understand how keen you are to do it, and then understand what that actually means in terms of what you want to innovate on. Then moving into the next part of this process around analyzing and selecting your innovation types. Well, there are lots of frameworks and processes around this, but just an easy one to look at is if you're focused on being a breakthrough innovator, on being, let's say, an Apple, for example, or Google, delivering a whole new kind of product to the market. There are ways to do this, and these tend to be quite well defined. So you don't just have a loose idea; you have a good idea, and you test that idea through a design process. And there's a level of investment required to fund that and support it and test it in market. You're looking to sustain your innovation, so incremental innovation. If you've got a product in market that you on a regular basis, whether it be weekly, monthly, quarterly, you roll out a small incremental change. And there's a level of investment in that, and also a level of upkeep and servicing required for that as well. Likewise for profit model, are you looking at improving your profitability? So where does that sit? Does that sit around being innovative in terms of understanding how your product's taken in market, how you service the product, what your background processes look like to do that? And then there's disruptive innovation. And again, disruptive innovation, quite similar to breakthrough, but disruptive being opening up entire new markets, opening up entire new customer channels, things that really require a lot of thought and a lot of research to go into it. And a lot of times this can involve things like having a VC model, for example, or a joint innovation lab where you partner with organizations who may have complementary services or skills or products that'll help you in what you're trying to do without investing in it directly yourself. So these are the ways to really approach and analyze where your kind of innovation sits. And the fact is, with most organizations, it'll be a mix of some of these, if not all of these. Most organizations tend to sit at the sustainable innovation level with incremental innovation, and that's great, but you need to know when to stop. And likewise, a lot of organizations, if you do that incremental innovation, it tends to be very, very low risk, but accompanying that tends to be fairly low return. It's just about retaining where you are, a sustaining position in the market, and it doesn't tend to have an overall big rock or a big bang kind of customer impact either. Moving through the process. Once you've done those things, you need to have the frameworks in place or the processes to be able to actually support what you want to do. And typically this would be, if you're talking about traditional product development or traditional business development process, it'd be a funnel of some kind. And in this process, it's around having an innovation funnel. First part really is around generating ideas. What does that mean? I don't have time in this presentation, unfortunately, to dig into it in a lot of detail because there is a lot of detail around this. But generating ideas, what do you use there? Is it a design process? What's the culture of your business? How do you capture those ideas? How do you look at them? How do you dissect them? What are your metrics around what you choose to pursue? How do you structure teams and people around that to actually generate and capture and then present those ideas back to some kind of innovation stop-start gate or an innovation council? And then of those ideas, which are funded? And if they're not funded, what are your models around pursuing those ideas which are marginal, haven't quite received the funding they might need to progress to a larger initiative, but still have support enough to be able to go through and come back with further evidence to actually receive funding? And then as part of that process, you kind of want to step through bit by bit and then decide, right, well, this idea has been funded. We've run a POC or a pilot. We've tested it in a small circumstance. Then we need to actually look at what our longer term investment is on this. What's our technology mix? What does this mean to the organization? How do we roll this out? And that's where you start to do the heavy planning and actually looking at what you need to do to really really properly invest in this idea and take it from being an initiative, a funded initiative, to something which really becomes a fully fledged product or service. And then you start to apply that product or service either in market or in business. And the fact is, in most cases, it'll probably apply to both. So when you think about that, when you look at, let's say, launching out a new product, you might launch it in a very, very small market. You might have a subset of people internally and some processes that are designed to support it. And you'll find that as you start to test that, you know, or everything looks great on paper or on screen, but in real life, once you actually start to roll it out and build something a bit more tangible out of it, you'll just start to notice that there are business improvements you can make. You'll get customer feedback, employee feedback. You find there might be data points that you thought you captured all your data points you needed, but you need to expand those because you're not getting the kind of reporting you need for your metrics, and that's where care sort of starts to roll into into BAU. In the previous point, I mentioned about applying those metrics and knowing when to start and stop your kind of process. Well, that iterative kind of investment you kind of put into improvement, it should apply to most products and services throughout, because you need to always check to see, as you know, whether or not what you've done from an innovation perspective or just from a business lens is actually servicing your market the way it's meant to. And all products and services, all of them at some point go into a point of decline, and we'll go into that in a bit more detail later on. What's interesting about this funnel is it actually straddles the couple of points before this and a couple of points after it as well. But it is important to actually build and define what that funnel looks like and what those various points are. So the last part is, at some point in the process, you will decide this product or service or organizational change or whatever it is requires either to be scrapped or to go through a large piece of re-innovation, a complete breakthrough again. And that's what the funnel really does. Moving across to the next part there, then, you know, that capacity, which was in the previous slide, the capacity to actually successfully deliver, understanding, you know, what that, and I'll just skip back to the previous slide quickly. We're talking about this part here, developing a business strategy. That ability to actually build, create, and sustain is important. And it's going to be different based on product innovation, process, paradigm, or positional innovation. And as I mentioned, even though your focus might be on a product innovation, more often than not, there's going to be an impact on process. You know, do we need to retrain salespeople to understand the product in banking terms? You know, does it affect your understanding of how regulatory compliance is applied? Does it affect existing products that customers might be using? Where are the benefits? So there is a retraining process. Likewise for call center operations, likewise for people who are servicing, whether it be loans or whether it be car sales, whatever the product or process is, or service is. So there is overlap between these, and that overlap varies based on what kind of innovation it is. The obvious ones are paradigm and positional innovation. Whereas these are very, very large scale, quite impactful forms of innovation. And oftentimes these will be associated with new products or services or with entirely new workforces, entirely retrained workforces to be able to service those forms of innovation. And only you and your organization actually know what you're capable of doing and what you're capable of delivering. So in all those previous steps where you've gone through and discussed and planned around what the benefits will be, what the potential cost will be. This is where I suppose the knife really hits the grindstone, and you start to actually look at, you know, what's feasible and I've had a mental blank there. What's feasible to be able to be supported by the organization. And where that desire for change really sits internally. And really at this point here, even though your pilot may have been fantastic, even though your research in your market might have been fantastic, and even though customer feedback might have been perfect, if the organization is unable to support that at scale, if they're unable to put the process in place to support it internally, then that's a point at which you need to actually make a hard decision. Do we pursue this, or do we pack it up and go home? So it's really kind of the last step in that sort of series of checks and balances, from going for, and anyone who's familiar with the concept of a double diamond, where you have a lot of great research, refine it down into a few great ideas. Then you expand those ideas out into concepts, and then refine it down into a solution at the end. This is the same process. You're going out with research, honing in ideas, going out with solutions, pulling back in again to something a bit more tangible. If at that end point you get to a part where the organisation just isn't able to support it, well, that's a point at which you stop, or you go back and rethink what the original idea was, and is it actually worth pursuing. Moving on to the next slide here, and really the last step in this process is really just what I've spoken about around not flogging a dead horse. And it always surprises me in every organisation I've worked in, and you'll probably nod your head silently at your end, or maybe throw a mug of coffee across the room. The number of times an organisation has a product or a service or some sort of offering out there, and they have near to no or incredibly atmospheric metrics they use. Anything new you do, anything new requires solid metrics in my mind to be able to present back to executive a solid business case as to why you should do it. And the side benefit is, which is also a challenge, is that through doing this process, you can oftentimes force, or should be forcing, the organisation to actually consider how it actually funds and supports and measures performance of its people, its products, its services. So check your metrics. And those metrics should be in place before you innovate, before you do anything, whether it be automation, whether it be some kind of desired change in CX or customer perception. Because once you have those metrics, you then know if what you're doing is performing, if it needs some kind of change. Is there a change in the market? Is there a change in customer sentiment? Is there a new technology which could potentially be applied to further improve what you're doing? And that's one of these things you need to consider. Understand your customer needs. And I haven't touched much on customer needs in this conversation because I'm assuming it's a given, but it's not always. People oftentimes still jump at a new technology, and everyone kind of, it's something that is really frustrating, I think, to a lot of people. People hear about a new technology or a new design process or something a competitor's doing. Just because it's out there doesn't mean you need to do it. You should always start with, what customer problem does this fix? And if you're retrofitting a customer problem to a new technology, it's not a great start. You should be going, what is my customer problem? Oh, here are 3 or 4 technologies or solutions that I could apply to the customer problem, even if they're just concepts. So understand the customer problem. And importantly, that applies internally as well. So understand your organizational problems. So we oftentimes talk about customers, but the fact is, in my view, and it's not a popular one, customers or customer needs are just a small part of what a business solution is. You can't just lead with customer all the time. Likewise, design or technology, they're not things that should initiate, they're not solutions to a problem. They're the viscous lubricating fluid that flows around these things to enable the solution. Understand your product or service proposition. Again, how's your product performing over time? It might be a star right now. Is it a cash cow? Has it become a dog? And that's that last part, that kind of decline phase of that funnel. At which point do you stop and go, that's it, we've had enough, we need to start from scratch, or scrap it completely, or find a new market, or expand our market. There's a whole conversation around this. And that BCG model is a really simple one to apply. And really the last step here is, is it time to revisit your approach? So, based on that BCG model, star, cash cow, question mark, or dog, do you continue innovating incrementally? Do you stop innovation? Or do you just go out and find a new market or new customers or new product to sell? So if I kind of bring it back to where we started with, and kind of look at this. Should you use AI in automation? Well, yeah, maybe. Who knows? It depends on what the actual customer benefit is and or organizational benefit. Can biometrics, self-service, all these fancy, bells and whistles, can they be applied to a faster, better, more self-sufficient journey? It depends on the customer. There's no one-size-fits-all solution to this. It's really about doing the hard work to understand what the appetite is, both from customers and organization, what your capability is, what the innovation mix looks like, how you're going to approach it, how you're going to fund it, and is it sustainable? That's the real question. It's not, are these things the right things, but are these things the right things for the problem you have? Will investing in new technology improve long-term ROI? Yeah, maybe, only if you have the right information. If you have the right metrics to understand where you're starting from, what your outcome is going to be, and how to measure those steps in between, and the strategy and support in place to support those proposals or initiatives. And lastly, what are the new ways to integrate digital customer experience? It's a question that back when I was consulting, and even now in my current role around strategy and innovation, you get asked all the time, and it's a frustrating question because, again, like everything, it depends on the organization, what you're offering, what you're selling, how you do it, who your customers are, what they want, what your competitors want. There are so many questions in this. And people oftentimes ask for headlines. The danger is that in providing headlines, you oversimplify something and you create a set of preconceived ideas towards a solution and outcomes that are missing the detail that you need to truly provide something meaningful back to your customers and to your organization. I think I'm right on time. Boom.
Yeah, you were. You perfectly timed. Thanks so much, Robert. A fantastic presentation. I really enjoy the conversation around tech being a step in getting to a solution, but it isn't the solution. You've got to always evaluate if it's the right step for you. So it was a fantastic presentation. Thank you so much. We do have a question here from Carol. Carol, thanks for your question. How is cybercrime factored into your customer strategies? And is it something that you showcase when presenting new ideas to customers?
Okay, so I have to answer this carefully because I work for a bank. Cybercrime on a general level to any organization should be a huge consideration. Now, I work with government a lot, so I have to be careful I say about government as well. But I will say it's at the forefront of everything that we do as an organization, and that our client, in this case, public sector, considers as well. How it's factored into your planning, if you think of any design, any kind of well-structured design process, whether it be a service design process or strategic design or even product design, it needs to be a holistic approach to solutioning. So you need to include everything from at various points, everything from data to customer service to cybercrime technology, and those inputs are incredibly important. And when you talk about your metrics at the very start of it, one of those metrics should be how what's our tolerance for I'll try and find a better word for break-ins. What do we do to address those? And they become part of your metrics. So yeah, incredibly important. It's a very long answer, sorry.
No, that's okay. And then we've just got more of a comment here, or slash question from Saiful. They say, awesome presentation, Peter. Are you able to share your slides? Love the categorization of config, offering, and experience for innovation focus areas, because AI and automation has a role to play in each of those categories.
It can. And I tend to talk down the importance of technology. Hey, sorry, I've got a pet rabbit and I just started chewing a cable. Yeah, look, I tend to play it down because people tend to jump on technology and change and AI and whatnot. I love data science as a designer. I love data science. I love technology, but I find that it's important to play it down to make sure that people take a measured approach to it. But my personal belief is, if you're not considering it, you're missing out. There's bound to be some sort of application in most processes.
Yeah, great. And we've just had another question come in, sorry. So this one's from Robert. Robert, thank you for your question. They say, what is the biggest paradigm challenge between technology and design in this space?
I don't think that technology and design are at odds like they used to be. So I'm quite old. I'm 51. I've been around for a while. When I started, you looked at technology and design as being two almost opposing things that didn't work in synchronicity. I think the biggest paradigm shift that we'll see coming up is that the focus on design as a tool or design thinking and CX and everything that goes with it. I think so far everyone's been concentrating too much on digital channels and on pure customer experience. And as I went to a closed lunch with a bunch of CTOs a little while back, but one of the comments made was, in IT, every road's paved with gold. They're well funded. And I think that ultimately where a lot of these things fall down, especially when you look at large organizations like banks, is you've got massive mainframe backbone systems that are run by IT, and IT more and more is open to the kind of innovation that we need to make good customer service and great organizational employee experience. And I think the next big shift will be moving that innovation focus back from customers and digital channels and pure tech into proper tech, into backbone systems. Because once you start talking to CTOs and people who sit just below that level about what they can do, they're eager to make change, but they've been left out of the equation for such a long time. But without their support, you're nowhere. You're hitting a brick wall. So I think that's the next big paradigm shift, is moving it back from data design and digital into old school tech, or big school tech.
Yeah, great. Yeah, great answer. Well, thank you so much for your time today, Robert. It was such a great presentation, and I'm sure we all really enjoyed it. Thank you.
Cool. Thanks very much.
Bye. All right. So moving forward, so I appreciate we've been on for about an hour and 40 minutes. So we've been going for a while. So feel free to get up and stretch while you consider this next question. So where do you want to see improvements in your customer service operations? Is it the people? We want to empower them to deliver better phone service. Is it self-service? We need customers to find solutions through our digital channels. Is it automation? We want to invest in a fully automated contact center with limited phones. Or is it data collection? Understanding who owns the data that comes through all these different departments and channels. So feel free to consider that. Have a bit of a stretch, maybe put on a cup of tea. We'll have the answers pouring in. We've got 3 more really exciting sessions coming up as well, which I can't wait. We're finishing off the day with a panel discussion with Joan Briley and Chris Douglas, which will be a good one as well. All right, let's take a look at our responses. Okay, so where do you want to see improvements in your customer service operations? So at 60% is self-service. We need customers to find the solutions through our digital channels. That's a huge majority there. Coming in second, we've got data collection, understanding who owns the data that comes through all these different departments and channels. We've then got the people. We want to empower them to deliver better phone service. And lastly, their automation. We want to invest in a fully automated contact center with limited phones. All right, interesting responses there. So moving forward to our next presentation with Prethi Bridgman, the Director Solutions Engineering in Asia Pacific, Middle East and Africa from Freshworks, who will be delivering a presentation on the future of CX. So 5 key CX trends that are defining 2022 for businesses and consumers. Prethi, are you there?
I am. Can you hear me?
We can hear you. Hello.
Hello. Hopefully the camera is not working and everything else.
Yes.
I know there's been some technical.
Okay, we can hear you and we can see you.
Awesome. Wow. I hope everyone's got their tea and coffee and whatever else and had a nice break. So let me start a little bit with talking about what Robert was kind of referring to as focusing a little bit on old school tech, or maybe looking a little bit more inwards. And so that's a little bit of the topic that I'm actually going to cover today. So focusing on not just customers, but employees as well. And we know that I'm not going to talk about the big bad COVID world, but we know that a lot has changed. And I think we're moving into the next phase of that world where customer expectations and employee expectations are different. But we know we need both employees and customers to really succeed and make or break a business. And so during these times, it's really important to focus on empowering both your customer and your employee. So that's what I'm really going to be focusing on today, how we manage that transition to both employee and customer. Let me change the screen. So one of the things that we talk a lot about is, and we see in the marketplace, is all the different channels that customers really rely on. So we know that customers are expecting experiences across all of these channels 24/7, and to be really treated as a channel-based journey approach. So talk to me at the right time, in the right channel, whenever I want. But the reality is a lot different. So I think within our own businesses, we all know the sticky tape glue and Band-Aids that are all holding all of our tech stack together, with trying to do point-to-point solutions, adding on more technology when we add on more channels, and really having duplicate systems that can sometimes do similar things. And what that has done is actually reduce the experience that we deliver to customers, but also reduce the productivity that we get from employees. So with that, I'm going to be talking a little bit about the future of CX, and I don't know why the formatting didn't come out there, so I apologize for that. And so my name's Preeti Bridgman. I am the Director of Solution Engineering for a region that we call APMEA, so Asia Pacific, as well as the MEA region, so Middle East and Africa. And what I'm going to really be covering in this topic today is some of the key trends that we have that we define in 2022, and how we empower employees and agents to empower and delight their customers, especially in a digital-first customer model. So entering 2022, we know that customer experiences were the top priority for businesses as they were forced to redefine what CX looks like, to go digital, and to have less human touch experiences, especially physical human touch experiences. And so consumers really embraced this, right? So you had a whole generation of people that were probably averse to using more digital channels, all of a sudden getting more and more comfortable with QR codes and scanning and all these other digital capabilities, chat bots, etc. And so businesses, as they've redefined the way that they have this omni-channel CX strategy or customer experience strategy, they've had to really think about, well, what does that mean in a hybrid work environment? What does that mean for my employees? And so we're going to look at some of these trends in a little bit of detail and understand that a little bit further. The first trend that we found when we ran our report was this want it now culture that dictates the terms. So when we surveyed over 4,500 businesses globally, and we analyzed 107 million customer transactions, we worked out that the driver of customer satisfaction was really speed of service. That was what led to the greatest satisfaction. And so when customers go to receive support, they want to have that on their app, on their messaging platform, on their social platforms, on the website. And the new want it now culture really dominates this online customer service or interactions, spread across all of these different channels as well. And so a great example of this is 7-Eleven. I think we all know 7-Eleven. We love that brand across the globe. One of the things 7-Eleven found is that their interactions through Facebook jumped by 44%. The trend, that was in 2020. 2021, the trend continued. It jumped by another 80% on top of that. And so every interaction that they had on Facebook ended up becoming a support request, something that someone had to action and do something with. And so what really happened there is that they needed a platform, and they had to use our platform to do more than just manage support tickets. They needed us to be able to triage and manage this high volume of social interactions and be able to route it to the right individuals, be able to auto-resolve cases without human intervention, and really try and reduce the burden on the employees that, let's be honest, during this time were struggling with their own COVID issues and things like that. So the time saved by using AI to help reduce some mundane processing errors or mundane processing activities and really drive productivity with the team that was there, which was a light team, really helped them improve their response rates, their satisfaction rates, and really resolve some of these issues that they had. So when we think about what organizations can do to help themselves in a time where human resources are quite expensive, onboarding and training them is quite expensive, and the change in what's happening in the world with the Great Resignation and now to the uncertain macro environment in the economy is also problematic. And so what we find is that a lot of organizations are using AI to help relieve some of this friction and to ensure that we've got bots and human support available to all of our clients and our employees so that it enables us to still have that one-on-one experience in the moments that matter. And so the best practice around using these bots, using analytics to surface insights, and really try and reduce the volume of basically simple, mundane queries, and then allow the agents to focus on what's really important, on the really tough things that that you're used to calling up a call center about, and you're used to getting first-time resolution on these issues, and to have bots focus on the more simple things that really shouldn't cloud someone's inbox. So with that, we've got our first poll question, and the first poll question that I'd be interested in out of the audience members is, have you explored using chatbots in your apps, your social media platforms, in your websites? And I'd really encourage you to think about, if you have, how do you use it? Like, do you use it the way 7-Eleven did, or do you use it in a more a different manner where it's really just to resolve some mundane tasks and to do things like password resets or very simple things? And so, no. Not sure if everyone can see that screen, but what I'll do is I will press next. And so it looks like 100% of the ones that responded actually said that that they do use bots, and that's great to see, because I think that the AI and the machine learning in bots is really critical to reducing some of that agent burden and increasing productivity. So the next one is really about seamless omnichannel experiences, which trump that digital patchwork that we have going on. And so now, one of the things that Harvard Business Review did was coin this word called digital. And digital is really a combination of physical and digital experiences. So when you think about customer expectations from their brand, they expect you to understand them as a person, their demographic, their interactions, their profile, and really deliver that hyper-personalized experience. And so we have customers within our portfolio that really take this hybrid model of digital and in-store and embrace that transition, so that whatever digital footprint a customer has in the digital world is seen in the in-store world. A great example of this is we had an eye provider as well, and they allowed customers to try on sunglasses online. And it used AI and a bunch of other technology to kind of visualize what the glasses would look like. When they came into the store, the great thing about this was the transition of who you were and your online digital footprint was received in store, and the salesperson knew exactly the types of glasses you were interested in and was able to take that information, and when you came in, identify you and then help you purchase those glasses. So therefore, it used the data intelligence that was collected online in an in-store manner as well. And so when we think about what does this mean, this digital world, it really is about unifying the customer view. So unifying the things that are critical to get a clear picture of what a customer needs and what they want to better serve them and to ultimately complete that transaction. So while this is difficult for a lot of organizations to do, the returns on having this unified customer view or unified single view is really important. We had one client who said, Preeti, I want in the first 20 seconds while I'm an agent and doing the small talk with the customers, to be able to, in 20 seconds, see what their profile is, who they are, their main details, their portfolio, what their spend is, what their lifetime value with our company is, what their past 5 support cases were, what their recent transactions were in 20 seconds. And so this unified customer profile and this customized view that they wanted, they needed it because in that 20 seconds, they had to listen to the customer and make a decision about what they were going to do next. And so this is the kind of new thinking that agents and employees are really driving towards to deliver a better experience to their customers and their consumers. So the third trend I wanted to talk about was really about messaging and mobile first conversations to redefine delight. So this is really about using things like Apple Business Chat, Facebook Messenger, WhatsApp. So all these channels that we've heard about a lot today, and really ensuring that we're communicating with clients in those channels through AI, bots, machine learning, chat, and also calling functionality as well, wherever available. And so in terms of this, we really want to start thinking about traditional channels like phone are expensive. And we know that moving to more cost-effective channels like bots and social channels is really the goal of companies these days as well. And so multitasking is becoming much more easier for customers, right? They're on WhatsApp at 1 minute, on Facebook Messenger the next, they're on the call with you as well. And so we really need to be able to, our agents and employees, be able to handle that type of multitasking that consumers do and do it in our world, do it as an agent or an employee as well. And so there are some great examples of organizations who have embraced the different social channels while having all these different platforms like chat and bot and caller and other functionality, all in a single inbox for an agent. So they can multitask while their customers are as well and see data coming from all different channels rather than being siloed across the business. And so when we think about the digital world and the fact that customers expect this instant gratification around the different channels and the want it now culture, we want to ensure that we are enabling employees to have these conversations in the channels and the paces that they prefer. And so going above and beyond to ensure that these messaging channels actually integrate with your existing processes is really important to us. So having a bunch of connectors, having a bunch of technology integrations into these ever-growing channels and having a marketplace that supports lots and lots of different channels is really important to ensuring that we're doing the right thing by our business partners. And then the fourth trend is about agent empowerment. So what drives customer delight? And we believe that agent empowerment is at the crux of that issue. When you have a happy agent, when you have an agent that is empowered, they're able to do their job, they've got the tools that they need to do their job, they're going to delight their customers. Happy employees, happy customers. We all know about that link between employee experience and customer experience. And so organizations and leaders in organizations have recognized this and started to invest in technology that reduces burnout, that empowers employees, that enables agents to become agents of delight. I think we all run our own employee engagement surveys. And one of the top trends in there is, do I have the resources and tools to do my job? So now all of a sudden, employees are speaking up going, hey, pay is important to me, culture is important to me, career progression is important, customer delight is also important. and I need the right tools and technology to do my job. And so when it comes to those things, some suggestions that we have is get rid of the repetitive tasks. No one wants to do mundane work. No one wants to do data entry. And so why have 2 or 3 different systems that you're copying and pasting from into a support ticket to get an outcome? Why not have everything automatically populated and pushed up towards me? And then also to start looking at how to direct agent workload based on the amount of training, the amount of knowledge that that agent has about a particular topic. So triaging and using bots and AI to triage things that come into an organization, whether it be closing the loop from customer surveys or whether it be an actual issue that's raised up. So then the next whole question that we have is, have you used AI, robotics, or agent assist machine learning technology to really automate these mundane tasks, to help empower your agents to get on with the job they're doing, what they love doing, which is fixing the more complex issues and getting customers' issues resolved? And so in the interest of time, I'm going to, hopefully you guys can all click on it and respond, but I'm going to move really quickly through the next couple of slides. So we've got quite a few leaders, 1 out of 3, that recognize that, oops, sorry, I think you might have actually missed a slide. That's okay. I will continue. 1 out of 3 leaders are recognizing that they need to build these digital platforms, that they need to focus on employees as well as focusing on customers. And so we need to ensure that we are supporting our teams and we're supercharging our teams as well. So this includes having things like agent assist bots. So rather than training employees, especially new employees all the time, why not have these bots that help employees do something like, hey, you want to cancel a transaction? You're an agent on the phone with a customer. Let me help you do that. The bot will kick in, ask you a series of questions and cancel that transaction. Having canned responses so that they're not spending time typing a lot of information out for repetitive, redundant queries. Collaborating with other departments as well is really key in ensuring that teams are really successful. And finally, the last one is moving from automation to prediction. And this is a really tough one because we need things like bots and AI to scale. We need data at scale to help us predict. But making sure that we automate and triage the right type of queries, being able to predict an outcome for a particular issue for a customer and to act on behalf of the agent to respond to that customer in a quick manner, using natural language processing. So using things like not just understanding, can you help me track my order, but what is the refund process? When will I receive the free refund? How can I actually look at using bots and decision trees to tackle specific issues like that, rather than more generic issues about what is the refund policy? And so it's really important to start learning and using the bots to really learn and to really focus on helping really get that personalized experience across to the customers. Fitness Passport is a great example that did exactly that. So they used automation to reduce 30% of their mundane tasks that their customer right now, that their agents used to handle. And so using bots and AI, you can really help empower agents and move further. So when we think about solutions like this, we really want to think about a couple of goals that we have in mind: modern, unified, scalable, intuitive, and cost-effective. Without these 5 features in a platform, you're really going to struggle to meet ROI, TCO, all of the big acronyms that basically mean, is this investment justifiable? Is it really delivering on the promise of helping my customers and my employees? And so we call that music, which is our acronym. And when we develop product, this is what we focus on. Is it scalable and intuitive and cost-effective, unified as well? And so when we think about that, we have a portfolio of different products, both for delighting customers and delighting employees. And we do this by ensuring, firstly, that customers are able to contact their brand or organization at any given point in time. We know that we need to communicate in different channels and automate the way we target prospects and our customers target prospects and customers. So we tie this in with sales and marketing automation to deliver a really superior support, sales, and marketing experience. we integrate this with employee solutions. So having a solution around how do we integrate the business world, so the departments, in with IT. How do we follow enterprise service management or infrastructure and orchestration to ensure that we get the best from HR, onboarding, as well as program development. But we found this sweet spot in the middle. And the sweet spot is really about enabling messaging and bots and chat. So really to allow modern conversational experiences between businesses and their consumers, and to then integrate all of that across the platform using AI and machine learning so that our partners and our customers can understand the data and use it more effectively and build applications on top of our platform. So that is my presentation for today. Thank you very much for your time.
Thanks so much, Prethi. We do have a question that's come in. I'm guessing Robert just couldn't find maybe a better word. Robert, thank you for your question. He has asked, regarding your sunglass example, where does the line go between magic and creepy?
It's a good question, and there is a line, right? So, and I think that answer is based on what demographic you're in. So a lot of the demographics that we're used to, the younger generation, I would say, are used to sharing their data, are used to getting that personalized experience as a result of sharing that data. So of course they opt in for these things, and we have mechanisms to ensure that we're following the right security protocols and things like that. But ultimately we work with businesses that define what their target audience is and how they want to communicate with them. So I agree with you. Some of this automation and AI stuff can get a little creepy, even for me. But I think the right answer really sits within the clients that we serve and what their end personas are and who they're trying to communicate with.
Yeah, great answer. Great answer. Well, thank you so much for your time. We have no questions that have come in just yet, but I'm sure that Prethi would be happy to answer any if you have any in the future regarding her presentation. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, moving forward to our next presentation. So we've got Phil Zammit here from, he's the head of Zoom CX GTM. And so Phil, we've got a recorded video with him, and then we'll actually go into a Q&A session with him as well post video. So the video we'll be looking at today is Supercharge Your CX with Video Optimized Unified Communication Platform.
Hi everyone, and welcome to this session, Supercharging Your Customer Experiences with a Video-Optimized Communications Platform. My name is Phil Zammit. I lead the newly launched Customer Experience, or CX, go-to-market team for Asia Pacific and Japan for Zoom. It's really my pleasure to be with you today to talk about Zoom's vision for video-optimized CX. Over the next 20 minutes or so, I'll take you through an overview of Zoom, what our customers have been telling us about customer experience, some of the changing market dynamics that we see, and an overview of the Zoom solution story. Okay, let's get into it. Look, so there's really no doubt that the world has changed pretty drastically over the last 2.5 years. We have all experienced and adjusted to it in many ways. And throughout this, Zoom was at the forefront of helping and enabling our customers, the whole world really, to rapidly adapt to this changing time. Importantly, the result is unquestionably that many aspects and sheer expectations of our working lifestyle are just different. At Zoom, we think of this as the employee experience. It just needs to be inherently flexible and equitable. And video has been at the forefront of the way in which we have remained connected both personally and professionally. We have seen that video is not only a mainstream form of communication, it's really accepted now, but also now in many ways expected. In fact, quick little side story, I'm a big fan of receiving feedback, personally, professionally, sometimes solicited, sometimes unsolicited. And a member of my team a while back suggested that when I was not on video times, just to go for long walks, that this conveyed the topic being discussed at that time wasn't a priority to me. It wasn't of high importance to me. Thanks, Todd. I really appreciated this feedback and tried to adjust from there. And such an interesting insight into how hybrid working has challenged and adjusted so much of our working life and changed both our social and professional norms and expectations. So the world of work is changing, and I think we all get and know this. And it's not only your employees that are changing. Your customers are changing too. But they also want to be able to do what they do as customers from anywhere and any time. Arguably, no one knows this better than we do at Zoom. We've seen an overwhelming and humbling increase in the adoption of Zoom here in APAC alone, which points strongly to people wanting those face-to-face interactions, but no longer wanting or allowed to have them in person. Of course, we are globally known for video meetings. We have seen people's growing appetite for video and the way that they use it to connect in family, friends from all over the world, to birthday parties, celebrations, weddings, or how it's become the de facto way to connect the elderly in aged care with their loved ones, like at Opal Healthcare in Australia, where they issue residents with a Zoom-enabled iPad when they arrive. And all of this happens because it's so easy to use. It has to be. Simplicity always wins, making it the platform people choose to communicate on for everyday things in their everyday lives. But I'm here to tell you that there is more to the Zoom platform than that, and that we are standing on the edge of a huge opportunity to take that demand and acceptance and expectation for video and Zoom's ease of use and apply it to transforming the customer experience in ways that extend far beyond simple meetings. How exciting is this? And what's our starting point? It remains as it has always been at Zoom, delivering happiness. And we do that through frictionless personal interactions. And nowhere is this more relevant than in the contact center. And this is why the market and our valued customers have encouraged us to extend our platform to continue delivering happiness now into the world of customer experience, into the contact center. So how do we take all that's been accomplished and learned in terms of video-led, next-level employee experiences into the contact center world? CX is an area where listening to your customers and understanding not only their needs, but their choices in terms of how they want to interact with you is so critical. And that's where it starts, with listening to what our customers have been telling us across the last 12 to 18 months all around the world. They let us know that they want the CX they deliver to their customers to be personalised, to be empathetic, to be low effort, ideally data-driven and truly smart, with AI and ML guided processes around CX to automate out the menial, repetitive tasks. That's what they want, because that's what their customers are asking of them. For example, with my financial services provider, who I won't disclose who that is, I really want them to know me, to value me, and ideally to think about my needs before I do. Actually, how good would it be if they reached out to me proactively with a suggested new mortgage rate offer? Ideally lower in mortgage rate would be great. What I don't want to have to do is for me to initiate that, have to go to an IVR, to authenticate myself several times, to be moved from person to person and not have my needs met. As a vivid customer example, the National Australia Bank replaced a whole host of legacy communications technologies with a cloud-first UC strategy with Zoom. And they call it a real game changer when it comes to their employee and now customer experience. People feel more connected than ever. They are meeting more, but for much shorter amounts of time. It's really bringing the front and back office together that allows them to show up for the customer in ways they couldn't previously. Now, over 30% of mortgages are managed through the use of video communications engagements with their customers, really extending the reach and speed in which way they're connecting with their customers. And on a personal example, as a customer, I would have loved to have had access to video or collaboration, screen share, whatever it may have been. And I think all of us could probably empathise with some of these examples. I was experiencing issues with my home broadband. I called through to the customer support team, eventually got connected to an agent. The tech support call had to go back and forth because the agent patched me to a technician who wasn't able to immediately understand the problem, probably my fault in not disclosing or detailing the problem correctly. And to be fair to the agent and the technician, this was probably a pretty painful and difficult experience for them as well, although I was a wonderful customer, I'm sure. Now imagine if the agent had just brought in a technician, a dynamically networked expert, directly into the Zoom call or interaction and elevated it to a true person-to-person collaboration, where through the power of video or screen share, collaborating, I could show them the problem immediately, the aim to have it resolved there and then, wouldn't that have made all the difference? This definitely would have helped me feel more valued and satisfied as a customer. Probably meant my kids wouldn't have been yelling at me as well for no Netflix. It really is no longer acceptable to just provide slightly less terrible service than your competitor anymore. Customers expect their problems to be dealt with personally, empathetically, effortlessly, and in increasingly smart ways that prevent them repeating themselves, waiting in queue for a long time, or having to contact you back again and again. Now, here's the important thing. In order to deliver on these characteristics of truly wonderful CX, the customer service operation must have technology that fulfills these requirements simply, cost-effectively, and progressively on demand. And sitting at the very center of this new expectation for CX is still the contact center. According to many research analysts, the contact center remains the first and highest volume interaction point with customers for most businesses. Its importance is undeniable. It really is difficult to achieve positive CX without a well-functioning contact center prioritizing the customer's experience. So contact center technology becomes a huge part of the CX transformation to solve the puzzle. And it's a transformation that is happening now. IT and business leaders placed customer satisfaction, or CSAT, at the top of their priority list for 2022 to 2023, according to 700 Metrigy survey respondents. That's ahead of things like product and service, quality, security, and even generating revenue. Incredible. And at the same time, 73% of contact center operations say they will continue with a work from home, remote worker, remote agent strategy after COVID, which makes video communication the enabler of the modern customer experience. In this era of contact center transformation, there is a big opportunity for us to unify the front and back offices in our delivery of next-level customer experiences. So much of the knowledge and expertise to help your customers is not necessarily sitting logged in as an agent in the contact center. And customers have been very clear with us. They want to unify and harness this knowledge at speed. So the Zoom platform is bringing together, truly unifying and video enabling the entire organization. And our vision is to transcend inbound customer service with outbound, proactive, over time, predictive customer service relationships that are human to human. And to further amplify this transition, by leveraging customer data for insight, and with the deployment of machine learning to drive automation for the removal of, as I mentioned before, repetitive tasks, like password reset, shipping delivery date information, and so on. This can dramatically free up agents for higher value-adding customer interactions. Essentially, in this model, a smart video communications platform for the contact center becomes an incredibly powerful driver of both efficiency and relationships, a true differentiator in the market for you, really focusing on true customer lifetime value. So let's now take a look at how Zoom empowers the contact center. As you can see from this slide, the Zoom platform is indeed an extensive portfolio of products and tools that our customers use, from what we have been traditionally known for in the UC space, such as Zoom meetings, now extending to Zoom chat and Zoom phone, which over the last 3 years we've seen an incredible uptake from our customers around the world, to our expanding developer platform, virtual Zoom events and webinars, to our recently launched CX portfolio, Zoom Contact Center. And we are really proud of what our customers are already doing with the Zoom Contact Center, which is the first omnichannel contact center platform optimized for video. With Zoom Contact Center, we combine video, voice, SMS, and web chat in Zoom's user-friendly interface that your whole company recognizes and knows how to use to make both the customer and the agent experience seamless. We believe we are helping solve the challenge of disparate systems, tools, and platforms, and bring together the best of contact center and UC in one with Zoom Contact Center. For all Zoom Contact Center agents and supervisors, their call, interaction handling experience is part of the same Zoom client that customers already use for UC today. Bringing contact center functionality into the Zoom client helps simplify the agent experience, empowering agents to be more productive while enabling collaboration with colleagues. It also simplifies IT, using the same Zoom app already deployed today. Zoom Contact Center is born in the cloud, as you expect from Zoom, built for scale while enabling customers to only pay for the agent support they need. We make video connections between customers and organizations simple, whilst also supporting native omnichannel contact center functionality over channels like voice, SMS, and web chat. For end customers, they can start the agent conversation where it makes sense from the digital presence of their choice, like a website, an application, or even a phone number, and easily add video if needed. This helps connect customers with expertise that sometimes only video can provide, whilst offering follow-up through other channels like SMS. And this is only the start. We are deeply committed to the CX market. And maybe when you think of Zoom, you don't immediately think of AI and ML in the world of CX. For example, we are continuing to invest in the AI capability of our contact center communication capability. We just acquired Solvvy. Solvvy is a conversational AI and automation platform specifically for customer support. Solvvy's differentiated AI and machine learning technology helps you deliver a concierge experience for your customers by guiding agents through fast and highly personalized interactions. And maybe you don't immediately think of workforce management when you think of Zoom. But did you know we acquired a global award-winning contact center compliance and workforce optimization solutions provider, Elevio, back in 2019? And in doing so, we gained the ability to optimize agent schedules, whether they are working in a physical contact center or remotely, maintain high quality and attract top talent. These are all areas where we see the opportunity to apply the familiar technology that your employees love to now customer engagements. The feedback from customers, and equally in our view, the connection between employee experience and CX has never been more important. During COVID, Zoom pioneered a new age of employee experience, as mentioned, via video collaboration. World-class employee experience has now become the building block, the backbone for world-class CX, in our view, and what our customers have been telling us. And our customers have said this to us, that they believe that optimizing in this space is to have one live seamlessly with the other. And in a hybrid world, world-class CX depends on your ability to deliver a unified experience by connecting that front and back office, from sales to service staff in the contact center dynamically, to technicians and subject matter experts, and ultimately the customer themselves. The notion of a networked expert becomes extremely powerful. And when you enable all of these groups with the video in a single, simple-to-use platform, then you can be increasingly personalized, empathetic, and effortless, increasingly proactive, ideally predictive over time, and intuitive in your delivery of customer experiences. So in closing, if there's one thing I would love you to take away, it's that there's never been a better time to embrace video to make the leap to a unified customer and employee experience. And the fastest way to reach your destination is to start with an experiment, a use case, a pilot, or proof of value. And Zoom would be privileged to help you on this journey to reimagine and supercharge your CX. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that presentation, Phil. I can see you've logged on for some Q&As. How are you going? Good?
Yeah, good. It's always weird to hear your own voice.
I know. I feel the same way once I look back at these virtual events. I try to mute myself. I've got a few questions that have come in here for you. So firstly, we've got Zoom is most known as a video meeting conference solution. And I've just learned Zoom actually has a full platform. But out of all areas that Zoom can expand their solutions to, why CX, and what value does Zoom see in the CX space?
Yeah, long question, isn't it? Well, hopefully I covered this successfully in the video webinar. Hopefully, anyway. Yeah, look, so I've been at Zoom for 6 weeks. Not that I'm counting. Yeah, we get asked that question a bit, and the answer is pretty easy, actually, and I hopefully covered it in the webinar. It's based on our customers' feedback globally. They've really encouraged us to extend our platform to really bring the power of a video-optimized platform, now really connecting our customer's customer, thus true customer experience. Personally, though, for what it's worth, I think, and one of the reasons why I joined Zoom, it's a real natural extension as well, increasingly, so that opportunity, certainly in my view, is huge in helping customers to improve that efficiency and value they deliver to their customers. Really underpinning in terms of the Zoom values around simplicity and ease. Not to say the world is super overly complex today, but really customers have been crying out for an improvement in the simplicity and ease of deployment and management of a UC and CC environment, ideally bringing video into the equation more and more. So that's the reason. Yeah. And was there a second part around, sorry, what does Zoom see as value in the CX space?
Yes.
Again, in simple terms, if we think about the customer at the heart of everything that we do, and that is truly what we do and configure and dimension our business, coupled with that mission of delivering happiness that I talked about in the webinar, it's a natural extension, isn't it? We really talked about employee experience, how the power of Zoom has been used so widely, adopted so widely in terms of organizations collaborating with themselves internally, externally with organizations. And it's just a natural extension to bring the customer into that. Again, to do that seamlessly, dynamically, ideally, and to bring the whole value of the organization into the frame. So not just that employee experience and moving that into customer experience, and not overlooking agent experience as well, which is another stakeholder custodian that's super important in delivering excellence in CX.
Of course. We've had a question come in here from Kate, and she's asked what clients are using Zoom as a contact center solution.
So we've only launched Zoom Contact Center, is made generally available, thank you, Kate, for the question, in the US region February, March of this year. The release of Zoom Contact Center, so it's only been generally available now for 3-4 months. Zoom Contact Center is due for release in the ANZ region in Q4, so it's imminent, so this calendar this year. We've had really significant uptake of the product. We've got a number of customer references at this point in time, but there's none that we can talk about that have really used the technology, let's say, in anger, if you like. And that's really important. We're seeing this in terms of customers are deploying Zoom Contact Center. There are customers today. And what measurable results and improvements are they seeing? So it's very early days, Kate, at this point in time. But the uptake has been, well, really humbling and really quite incredible. And it shows... well, certainly the hypothesis in terms of the value of customers saying to us, bringing that Zoom environment, the meetings environment, the Zoom phone, so the UC platform, extending that into CX. So the uptake that we've seen has been really overwhelming in the North American market so far.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, you've just kind of answered this question, but I will ask it just in case. So we've got a question that's come here through Callum. Callum, thanks for your question. And they've said, I've never thought about video in a contact center space. How do you identify the need, and has the reality of your customers' appetite met your expectations?
Yeah, it's a great question, isn't it? I mean, I think if Callum agrees with this, I think video has been traditionally seen as an outlier use case, as an outlier channel. Now, there's always that question, isn't it? Kind of a sliding doors. Is that the case because of the difficulty and the challenges of deploying video in a contact center environment, the social impact of it? Do agents really want to, you know, there's a whole bunch of questions here. I guess our premise is, and again, based on customer feedback over the last 12, 18 months, is that by making video adoption really mainstream, that whole acceptance and expectation that we all have, I think, as consumers, and I cover in the webinar that I'm sure you all listen to with great excitement. What it really shows is that there's certainly a use case for it, we believe. The customers that have started to extend now into the CX space using Zoom Contact Center, as I touched on before, early days. So we're going to learn with our customers here. But our view is that that human-to-human interaction, that personalize, the ability to connect on a more human level, video is a really powerful mechanism for that whole empathetic engagement, where it makes sense. I'm not suggesting, and we don't think that, well, customers aren't saying to us that they see video as the, you know, removal of the voice channel as such, but where it makes sense in maybe higher value transactions, engagements, complex situations like I touched on, where not just video, but the use of video along with collaboration, maybe screen share and so on, becomes a real powerful addition, and we think a differentiator of time. But I think Callum's question is spot on. I think traditionally video has been sort of largely marginalized to, you know, scenario X, Y, Z. But again, the question is that because it's been so difficult in the past to deploy it, and has video been accepted enough. And I guess the other question that I touched on as well is the social aspect, the agent impact as well. Do agents want to be able to, dynamically bring video in and so on? So there's a whole bunch of questions here, and we think it's exciting because we're going to learn with the industry, learn with our customers.
Absolutely. We've got another question here, which is for any CX professionals who want to embark on this journey. What would be the top 3 most important elements they need to consider, and what can they do to start driving change?
Yeah, it's a really good question, isn't it? I think for me that the first thing should always be the starting point is kind of an analysis, isn't it? What's working, what's not working? And is that customer, are you delivering the service, the experience that your customers want? And if that's yes or no, then I kind of go to question 2, question 3. The second piece is if you believe that there is a way to enhance or improve, or there's a problem per se, challenge statement, what does that target state look like? What does good look like? I realise it's a fairly naff kind of statement. And that involves, it should always involve a whole host of key stakeholders in the organisation. I think that's one of the things that everyone is very well aware of. Whether it's identified enough, though, and brought to the surface that a transition of, analysis of, and also a transition of a CX state is multi-stakeholder. And we all know that. At the end of the day, the customer is the most valued element in the business. So everyone kind of has a touch point into that, has a view. And the last thing I think is really crucial is without it, then you usually see projects not get up, or there's a likelihood that they'll stall or even fail, is executive support. Because any type of identification of a problem statement, let's target this environment, what does good look like, requires change. And change is hard, we know that. So there's a business technology side of things and inherently cultural change. So without the executive support, their buy-in to that program of change, what that target state looks like, then I think the chances of success become less. So they're the 3 things that I think become the anchors, if you like, for any type of program of change.
Okay, great. Well, that's all the questions we've received as of yet. Thank you so much for your time, Phil. It's so interesting, and I can't wait to see this implementation and hopefully use it soon myself in the future.
Thanks so much.
Oh, actually, just quickly, sorry, we've had one question come in. Do you mind answering it?
Of course, yeah.
We've got time for one more? Sorry for the late hold up. So Anusha, thank you for your question. Anusha said, we were looking at creating separate Zoom channels for our top accounts, but what stopped the whole thing was that the network is patchy in certain areas of Asia Pacific where our support is based out of. While it's a great idea, is there a way we can triage and know which ones require videos and which ones will not?
Yeah, it's kind of a complex question. So maybe the best way to answer that question is if we can exchange details post, and we can get the right people involved in that, because I don't want to just give an answer to that question. It's a very interesting but complicated question, and we're talking about certain parts of Asia, and it sounds like there's sort of multiple channels that are being asked there as well. So video, obviously we're very proud of the fact that from a Zoom technology perspective, that low bandwidth delivery of video is a real asset, real strength of our platform. But I don't want to give any incorrect answer to that question. It's a great question, but maybe we'll take that offline, and I'll get the right people.
Yeah, we'll take that offline, Anusha, and we'll pass over your details through to the Zoom team, and hopefully you'll find the right answer there with them. Thanks so much for your time today, Phil. I hope you enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you.
See you, bye.
All right, so moving forward, we have a panel discussion with our two panelists here. We've got Joan Brearley, who is the Director of Service Delivery, Driver and Vehicle Services at the Department of Transport, Western Australia. We also have Chris Douglas, who's the Director of Member Services Pacific at Accor Plus. We'll be discussing how you can understanding how CX can leverage technology and digitization to enhance their personalization practices. So I'll just do a little bit of a pulse check and make sure that both Chris and Joan are online and ready to go.
I'm here.
Hello, Joan. How are you?
Good, thank you. How are you?
Good, thank you very much. And we'll just check that Chris is online as well. I believe he is. while we wait for Chris to hop on and make sure his camera and mic is working, we might get started. Would you like to just briefly chat, Joan, about a short intro into your current role?
Sure, absolutely. I will actually just start with acknowledging the Whadjuk people of the Noongar Nation, and I'm coming from Perth, and that is our land here. And I'd like to recognise their leaders and ancestors past, present and emerging. So welcome everybody, or Kea as we would say in Noongar here in Perth. So my job here at the Department of Transport is I look after our service delivery operation that goes from our contact centre, back office processing, our retail space, and quite weirdly, vehicle safety and standards. So I look after all of those, and obviously customer experience is really important to us, and being a licensing authority, as everybody around Australia will know, we actually know a lot of things about a lot of people, and so personalised service is something we could leverage, and are looking at AI to actually give us a lot of that wonderful experience, so we can actually do event-based services and talk to you as a person rather than as a transaction. So I'm really happy to be chatting with Chris today, because I think there's a lot of things that government and private industry are doing to make our experiences better utilising AI.
Great, thank you so much. And Joan, Chris, I can see you there. How are you going?
Good, thanks, Alexandra. How are you? Thanks for having me.
Good, thank you very much. Thank you so much for joining us. We might also just ask you to do the same. Do you want to give us a bit of a short intro into your current role?
Yeah, definitely. So I work for Accor Plus. So we're part of the broader, I guess, the global hotel network known as Accor. And Accor Plus is the largest paid loyalty subscription program in the Asia Pacific region. In my role is Director of Member Services. So that role is part operational in terms of managing inbound customer queries or member queries, but it's also strategic, and it's really about how we can, evolve and provide the best customer experience out there. And our ambition is to provide, the best in the world. It's still an ongoing journey, I would definitely say, but that's, I guess, my role.
Yeah, great. Thanks so much, Chris. We might get started with the first question. I'll throw them to one of you at a time. So let's start with you, Joan. So how have you and your organisation utilised AI tech to elevate personalised practices?
All right, well, I'm going to be really honest with everybody here. We do it sporadically, and we don't do it as well as we could do. So I also, as part of my role, run the 13 COVID hotline for Western Australia. And so during COVID, we were very good at utilising some new tech to actually communicate with people on a personalised basis. And that's mostly in the digital channels. Now, if somebody came to us physically, we actually don't provide that personalisation right now because in my experience, and I don't know whether it's the same with Accor, but there is no connection between channels at the moment. So we put AI into a new digital channel that we developed for COVID, but we actually haven't retrofitted it into part of our existing suite of products. So at the moment, anything new that we do, we put AI in there and we go, there is no point talking to Joan about a visit that she's making to a particular location because she hasn't been there, but we can give her a different message. But if you come to my traditional channels at the moment, we haven't retrofitted that. So for us, AI is something we build into and personalize for things that we have in the future, but our massive challenge is how do we actually bring it into our traditional business, and how do we personalize our traditional business to Joan's needs, wants and experiences? And I'd be, interested to see what Chris says about that in the hotel industry.
Yes, yeah, Chris, so same question for yourself. I'll just repeat it. So how have your organisation utilised AI tech to elevate personalisation practices?
Definitely. So I guess at Accor Plus, we use AI in a couple of different ways. I guess we suffer the same, issue with Joan in terms of those face-to-face contacts. But for our digital channels, we definitely utilise AI in a a few different ways. So one of them is your customer-facing AI, and what I mean by that is your standard, bot and web widget. However, that bot also runs on dynamic web forms and other channels, live chat, and also email to try and resolve customer queries or those, I guess, high-volume, low-touch queries. We also use AI in the back end. So we've got a big focus on driving and enabling self-service for our customers because we want them to speak to us when they want to, not because they have to. And so we've got AI running behind our self-service help center, you could say. And that basically runs a bit of intelligence behind a few different things. What are the common searches on our help center and what content can we create to, I guess, plug those gaps? But it also runs through our ticket history and our verbatim comments from our customers to highlight, all right, these are some gaps you've got in your knowledge base that we're seeing come up quite a lot. And our team will then create content behind it. We also use AI to, I guess, really give us insights on what are the key pain points in the customer journey. And our agents obviously are able to use a lot of that information on hand to see what that customer's previously searched on, what they've previously done, to really personalise that experience when they contact us through one of our digital channels.
Okay, great. Yeah, thank you.
Oh, I was just going to say, I agree with Chris there. The personalisation bit is in early phases for us, but we use AI in the back for automated workflows and to understand, what people are looking for, and then how do we proactively communicate. But it's not, we're not as good as you, Chris. We don't know if somebody has been through the website and looked for how to transfer a vehicle and then calls us up. But, that's something that we're looking at in the future and capturing all of that. So it's great to learn, have these shared experiences.
Yeah, of course. Okay, so I'll throw again to you, Chris. So before implementing AI tech, how do you identify the right software or software solution for your organization?
Definitely. So thanks for that question. So we knew that we wanted, this is going back a couple of years ago, just before the pandemic actually started. So we knew we wanted to introduce AI, but we didn't really know where we wanted to start. And so we wanted to start, we didn't want to, I guess, invest too heavily because we didn't know what the outcomes were going to be. And so we really wanted to introduce AI that would really enhance that customer journey. And as I mentioned, really deflect, high volume, easy queries that customers could probably find the answer to. And we wanted it to really turbocharge our self-service experience. However, as I said, we didn't want to spend too much either on setup. So what we did is we went to market, and I had a look at a few different providers. And there's some amazing people out there that are doing, amazing stuff at the moment, far beyond what we're currently doing around conversational AI and that sort of piece. But we spoke to a couple of vendors and found a product that fitted our needs. Although it's still a continuing evolution, so it's definitely not. With AI, it's about the journey, not the destination in a lot of ways. And it's so quickly evolving that we're constantly looking on how we can make improvements to optimize it.
Yeah, of course. And how about yourself, Joan?
Yeah, quite similar, really. We went out to market a couple of years ago, actually, for new knowledge management and contact center and resource planning software. But as part of that, we actually chose a services provider who were actually on the same journey that we were on. So we said, right now, we know what we know, but we actually don't know what we want in the future. So we knew we wanted to do AI. And so we've been working with them, just like Chris, to go, we have some high volume, low touch transactions. And so we worked with them to do a proof of concept to say, will this work in our environment? So, our environment is very legislated. Our database is very well protected. And so to do some of that AI, there's a lot of barriers for us to actually integrate all of those things. So we worked on a proof of concept, and we're actually just rolling out some AI in our processing areas, because for us that's very low risk, where we will automate some of those high volume, low touch, very regular things that we get. The other thing that we've done is we, just like Chris and Accor, is we are understanding what are the questions that people are asking us through multiple channels. So we're understanding what are they asking through our contact center using sentiment analysis. So that AI again in the sentiment analysis. What are they asking us through our website? So what are they looking for? And in our retail space, what are the things that our retail people are looking for in our knowledge solution? And then we're using that to understand what can we do from a proactive way using AI and automation to prevent some of that, what I call non-value work coming into our high-cost channels. So a lot of people ring us and say, what's happening with my vehicle transfer? Well, if I can automate a response to the people who apply for that, it will actually prevent a lot of calls and a lot of visits to our sites. So that will actually, because we're a cost recovery agency, that will actually reduce costs for everybody in Western Australia and provide a much better customer experience. So like Chris, we start small and then we do proof of concept. We work with a partner who is completely on our wavelength, and it's horses for courses. So we put in what we need for that particular solution, and then we work with our provider to actually grow that for the rest of our business in the future. So we've got some exciting things happening in the near future here for drivers in Western Australia.
Yeah, and that actually leads well into my next question. So with these insights and from those touch points, how do you share those insights with other departments or other teams within your organization?
I'll just talk about that. So it's interesting, very timely, because we did, so what we do is we do a bi-yearly planning with those areas. So the knowledge management teams, the web teams, the training teams, the processing, the policy teams, we actually plan, we say, here are the customer insights. So what are the things we're going to do differently in the future to try and eliminate some of the pain points for our customers, and more importantly, the pain points for our colleagues. So we're always looking at how quickly can we get people to competence so they can provide services to customers. So at the moment, it takes about 3.5 months for someone to become competent in our contact center or in our retail space. Well, if we can eliminate some of those non-value transactions and train people in the things that people do need to come to us for and are really important to them, then we might be able to get them to competence much quicker and provide better customer outcomes. So we actually share insights and we actually work together to deliver that customer experience. But that comes back to our strategic blueprint, and it's something here at Transport. We are just redeveloping our customer service blueprint. So what does that look like? What's our vision? We may have a vision, if we're digital first but not digital only, we only need to see you in a moment of truth, not for all of the things that you want to be able to self-service for. But then what does that mean for our services? What does that mean for our training? What does that mean for automation? And what does that mean for all of the processes and procedures that government put people through, so that we have an enabling service model rather than one that is, bureaucratic and old government, I guess.
Yeah. That's great response. And then, Chris, how about yourself? How do you share those insights from the digital channels with other teams or other departments within your organisation?
Yeah, definitely. So we strongly believe in, the democratisation of data, particularly in the CX space. And really sharing those insights. So what we have is live real-time dashboards that are accessible at various different levels, so from the C level right down to the agent level. And obviously those dashboards and that real-time information is tailored towards, the audience, most particular. And that incorporates not just the AI channel, but all the different channels, with a real focus, particularly on the dashboards that go to the C level and below, a real focus on, what is the ROI, what is the return on investment, and also the improvement to the customer journey. Because by leveraging AI, we're not trying to deflect or stop people from contacting an agent, but what we're wanting to do is enable that agent to have really quality or value-adding conversations for those more complicated and complex queries. Because AI is really good at, a real transactional level of queries, but when it gets quite tricky, people still want to jump on the phone and give a call to an agent. And so it's really about not driving people away from agents, but looking at what are those quality adding conversations But so those are the key things that we do to share insights. Obviously, we share them during reporting periods and things like that. But our C-level, our department heads, even our agents have their own live dashboards they can click on any day of the week and see real-time information of what's going on.
Okay, and actually with that, Chris, is there any obstacles or challenges you face with sharing these insights?
Not particularly. I mean, I guess the hard work comes in putting them together and really just deciding what information is relevant. Our CEO doesn't need to see every piece of information, but you definitely need to target that, and you also need to target it quite smartly. And you want to be transparent about what you're presenting, but you also want it to tell the right story, right? And show that the investment that the company is making in the CX space is returning value. And so that's been really important. So for us at that C-level, it's about promoting things like the ROI via AI, the deflection rates, the time being saved and the money being saved. But also we've got digital revenue channels that have started because of this whole project, and showing that direct revenue that's coming into the business as a direct result.
And how about yourself?
I'm very jealous, Chris.
Is there anything you face that's an obstacle or a challenge sharing insights?
I think it is understanding. So just like Chris, I'm so jealous, Chris. So, one of the things on our roadmap for the next 6 months is to have that dynamic dashboard. So, what does a colleague need to see? So unlike you, we're not about revenue generation. Although for me, cost saving is really important, because every dollar that I save means a dollar I don't have to pass on to the community of Western Australia. So, we're developing that dashboard. So what is the story that a colleague needs? What is the story that a line manager needs? What's the story that me as a directorate head needs? Well, what do we want to see? What do we want our executives to see? So at the moment, when I get data, I have more questions than I have answers. So it's about understanding what is the story we're trying to tell, and having a dynamic dashboard that is manipulative, is easy, because at the moment, again, I'm going to say typical government, I don't mean that in a bad way, but we have a bit of a cottage industry in pulling dashboards and reports together, and honestly there is so much data you could probably swim in it and drown. So it's like, what is the really important stuff? So if our customer experience, our digital experience is self-service first, and it's only if it's complex it comes to us. So how are we achieving that? If it's about moving people from a high cost, so we still have about 3,000 people a day who pay their license through the IVR. Now, I have a 30% dropout rate through the IVR. So actually, what am I doing about channel shifting them to the website, which costs me a lot less, and I have a much better response rate? So is that the journey I'm trying to talk about? Is that the shift? Digital billing. So every time somebody opts for a digital bill and not a physical bill, that saves me $10.50 every single bill. So how am I doing with that? If that's the story we're trying to tell for the improvements that we're trying to do from moving them from physical to digital and using AI to help that in insights, then how do we have a dashboard that tells that story? And then when our focus becomes something different, how do we have a dynamic dashboard that doesn't lose all of that but adds to that richness? So I'm very jealous, Chris. I'm probably going to talk to you after this meeting and say, tell me how you did it.
Give the step-by-step instruction manual, please. Okay, so with implementing new tech, I mean, obviously there's always an obstacle. There's a few obstacles that occur, and especially when it comes to handling data and service models, etc. AI tech can be a bit overwhelming, I guess, to implement. And so, what were the obstacles, I guess, you faced, and how did you overcome them? Let's start with you, Chris.
Sure. So I guess the implementation itself wasn't once it got started, it was fairly straightforward, thankfully. So that was great. And obviously it's been on a journey. It wasn't perfect from day one, but it's been on definitely an optimization journey for the last couple of years. But it's also about, having the right change management internally, particularly with the team, because when we told them that they were introducing AI and it was going to solve all these queries, obviously it's a bit of people get taken a bit aback. by that, particularly people who've been there for a long time. So it was about taking along those people along the ride. And I guess the other challenge, I guess, was also driving a change in customer behaviour. A lot of our customers are, I would say, a little bit more mature, and so initially we're a bit reticent or a bit hesitant. And it was about how do you, I guess, drive that customer behaviour rather than picking up a phone to try one of these other digital channels, particularly with AI and you know, bot as well. And I guess what we wanted to make sure is that journey was fairly good from when we went live, particularly around the AI and the bot, because if people try it and it doesn't work, then they're not going to try it again. But you also don't want perfection to be enemy of the good either. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's a great response. And how about yourself, Joan? Was there any obstacles you faced, and how did you overcome them while implementing AI tech?
Yeah, we have a lot of obstacles actually, and it all starts with us actually wanting to do some AI initiatives. So, you know, lots of people have great stuff that's out there, but as a government agency, we have procurement processes that we need to follow, and sometimes that can prevent us doing like proof of concepts, or somebody might come in and say, can we just do some exploration and see if it's possible? But you can't do that because, you know, we have these procurement rules. So it's actually working at that level with our procurement people and our IT people to understand what we can do. So we're very lucky that we have a partner that we've got a very broad contract with, which allows them to come in and bring partners in to work with us. But then it's also around identifying those silver bullets and understanding what can we do. So that's why I said we're starting really small in one of our back office processing teams who deal with individuals and in a very restricted space so that we can prove that this can do. Now, anything that needs to integrate with the licensing database is going to be complex for us and very costly. So it's really around what can we do without having to go into that very secure database, but also provide a really great customer experience and do those proof of concepts so that we can actually start then putting those to customers. So on our roadmap in the next 12 months, there will be some self-service options in the future, but actually we need to get the back office right. So I've worked in private industry as well, and you know, I've been in organizations that have looked as though they've got great digital channels and it's all wonderful, but in the background we're running around like little mice putting wallpaper and patches on things. So we don't want to do that. We actually want to get the foundations right before we actually present that publicly, because if we do that, that will set us up for success in the future, because the last thing we want to do is run around in the back, plug in the holes and trying to make it look as though it's all sexy and wonderful in the front line. So we're starting back and moving forward rather than going forward and retrofitting, if that makes sense.
Makes total sense. I think that's a common practice, is that you end up kind of Frankensteining an AI solution because you're just trying to patch things together, make sure things work. And if as soon as you see an issue, try to, you know, find a solution and deploy it straight away. But then sometimes, you're exactly right, don't have those strong foundations for further developments. You've just got to lay the foundations correctly. So yeah, that's a great point. Moving on to our next question here. There can be a bit of a learning curve with new technology. How did you introduce like the new software to your team and ensure their competency with it? Do you want to start with that one, Joan?
Honestly, I can't keep up with my team wanting to do these things. You know, I think they're like, come on, when are we going to get them? Obviously, as a leader, sometimes I can be a bit judgy and go, oh, you know, because I've got some mature people who work for me, and they're the ones who are going, come on, can we do this? And I would be thinking it would be the younger people. So I'm really fortunate in that area. But obviously with change, there is a process to go through to understand what you did yesterday, you might be doing differently. And we just engage our people all the way through that process. We understand that, you know, your job is changing. So what you do is still really important, and there's still going to be a job, but we'll work with you to get you up to speed with what we do in the future. Now, a lot of my people are always saying, this is actually allowing us to spend more time, and I think Chris said this earlier, more time with the people who actually need us, rather than spending time on things that we should just be getting right as the foundational activity. So nobody should ring us to say, where are you up to with this? Because we should be telling them using AI and understanding. But if somebody comes and talks to us around a very sensitive matter, then we want to be able to spend the time with them. So all it's doing is it's releasing the people who are real experts in this field to be experts and to provide that higher level of care to those people who actually really need us, rather than on those high volume, low value transactional inquiries that we get, which we do want to be automated through digital channels, and we want people to self-serve as much as possible. We have about 1.5 million people signed up to our digital channels, but actually getting the right transactions in there and the utilization, that is the challenge. So it's not actually bringing our staff on, it's actually bringing our customers and making the channel really easy to use from both perspectives. So I think bringing people on the journey. I don't actually have a problem bringing people on the journey. They're knocking at the door all the time. But I think it's also around making them really useful. So I'd be interested to see what Chris says about this, because quite often when we talk about AI, our IT people get all excited and they got a solution, and if we just do this, we'll give you that. But actually, it should be driven by the business backwards, with IT people supporting. But I often think that IT people go, this is actually an IT solution, so have we got a deal for you? But Chris, I don't know, what did you find? I'd be interested to understand what you found.
Yeah, I'm really lucky in that, our department was given, I guess, not free rein, but the choice of what solution we're going to go down the path of. And so therefore it was very much a CX-focused solution rather than a tech solution, if that makes sense. Obviously, we've got a great IT team and they do a fantastic job. I want to make sure I say that. But it was really about looking at systems that were not only really CX-focused, but really EX-focused as well, so that employee experience. And so for us, it was, like you mentioned, taking them along on the journey, and our team was really excited to be a part of that. But I started those discussions way before we'd even chosen the software, about really outlining this is the vision for the future. Your jobs are going to still be there, but they're going to change. And that also means upskilling them in different skills to really be able to handle, high-level complaints, escalations, those sorts of things, and really elevate that level of service. So it was really about, I guess, taking the team along from the very beginning of that journey. We spent a lot of time in the implementation of bringing agents into workshops from across the different teams and asking them, what do you want? What are the issues you face? Do you have any solutions or any ideas that we can put into place? Because I think sometimes companies can put solutions in place thinking they know, but not getting any actual input from the people who are the ones taking the calls and actually seeing the problems. So those were, I guess, the key things that we did to take people along the journey, really focusing on the employee experience and really having a really in-depth conversation with our team throughout the whole process.
No, that's a really good point. I think it's also really important that I think people do, as you said, teams can get a bit worried about a new software and their job security, but it's actually showing them how they can become a more strategic player, handling those more complex issues and customer calls, and using their expertise in that manner. So I think, that's a really good point as well. So as you're in different industries, I might throw this to you first, Chris. As you're in different industries, transport and then travel and leisure, et cetera, do you think the tech choice varies dependent on your product and service?
I think CX is CX. So if you're choosing a product based on a CX, there's going to be obviously a myriad of different differences between myself and Joan's journey in getting things signed off and getting things implemented. But I think the tenets or the pillars of CX and the customer journey are always the same, no matter what industry you're in. And it's about really delivering that great customer experience. But as I mentioned, Joan, I'm sure there's lots of things that you have to battle that I don't. So
Yeah, you're right there. But I completely agree with Chris. So, the days where customers would go, this is a government service, I'll get what I'm given, or here I'm purchasing a product, I have more of a say, those days are gone. So absolutely, customer experience needs to be consistent regardless of whether you are hospitality, you're selling something, or you're providing a service. And customers actually demand that. And, I think every organization, regardless of who they are very focused on that, because we know that if we provide great customer experiences, certainly if you're in the private industry and you're selling something, you get great customer loyalty. They're generally willing to spend more money with you. Now, from a government perspective, if people are happy with you, it still translates into that. It translates into less complaints. It translates into less visits to our, cost centres, which are our branches. There's less interference from a ministerial perspective. So you're right, CX is CX, UX is UX, and EX is EX. We compete all of the time for our employees against the mining industry here in WA. People stay with us because they are actually part of creating their future. They, just like Chris was saying before, they say, these are the pain points in our business. I say to them, how do you think we could fix it? And they are part of that solution and bring their colleagues along. So that could, so I think, I'm aligned with Chris. CX is CX. It doesn't matter where you work. Yes, I have a bit more bureaucracy probably than a non-government organisation, but actually customer outcomes are customer outcomes. Employee outcomes are employee outcomes, and it doesn't matter where you work. If you get that mix right, then you will be successful. As I said before, we are actually a 100% cost recovery agency, and so in WA, the community of WA pay my salary through a recording fee on their driver's license renewal, and that's about $10.56. It used to be $41, so we've done really well at getting it down. But I'm conscious every time I make a decision, how much is that costing? Can I do it cheaper? Can we automate so that we reduce costs? And it's all about adding value to both our colleagues and our customers.
Yeah, that's great. That's a great answer. I think it's a great place to leave it. Thank you so much, both of you, for your time today. It was really interesting to hear you both discuss and see the similarities. I think it's a very strong shared experience, what I learned today personally. Thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you.
Thank you. See you later. Bye.
Bye.
And thank you so much, all of you, to joining us today. It was fantastic a morning. I hope you go off and enjoy your lunch. Before you do, check out the digital gift bag, which has those resources we were talking about earlier, with a few case studies and relevant blog posts, etc. And enjoy the rest of your week. Thank you so much.